Waking up.
We are live. Welcome everyone. How y'all doing? I don't think we had an intro this time around, but I'm joined by my guests. Although this is more like a crossover episode, Baba Sundiata, Cha-Jua, and Two Black. And do you all mind introducing yourselves for the people who don't know, who haven't tapped in on this channel, what you do, what programs you host, things like that?
You want to go first, Two Black?
Yeah, by getting an echo. Can
No worries.
y'all hearing that? Is it just
It's just you, but we had that a few times. I'm gonna put in my headphones just to be sure. I'll mute. Maybe it's me.
okay?
Yeah, let me do that as well.
Yeah, forgive the tech. Two Black, poet, host of Blackness podcast, scholar, and lead organizer for Penalty Two.
Thank you, thank you. I know Baba Sundiata just went to get headphones. Bear with me. I'm gonna switch to mine. Always fun having to take these things.
Okay. Did Two Black did you introduce
On you.
soon? You a retired associate professor emeritus now from University of Illinois, and I host Real Talk: History as a Weapon for Black Liberation.
Thank you both. And if y'all aren't familiar, those are two programs on this platform you should definitely tap into. Baba, who did you interview last on the episode? Because I know episode before last it was Two Black, so y'all should definitely check out that conversation. And then who was the last one you had on?
The last one I had was Scott Kuroshige, and he just published a book entitled American Peril: The Violent History of Anti-Asian Racism. Now, upcoming, I've got a real treat for you. I got a PhD student who's writing her dissertation on Ferguson. She is looking at the relationship between Black liberation movement organizations and labor. And specifically, she discovered what none of the so-called public intellectuals either were aware of or to reflect on, that the first activists to move in Ferguson and begin organizing were Black organizers for the Fight for 15. So it was labor activists. And then we'll see that the publicity went to that scandalous group that we now call Black Lives Matter.
Well, I think that's very relevant to the reason we're here today. So I'm going to get us started on what we do here. So this is the Black Atheist Tradition, and this is episode 6. It's kind of two names for this episode. So the first one is we are an internal neo-colony, and we're going to talk about what that means. But also, the Black Church has us hostage, and those two things are deeply related. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we get started, while this is not exclusively a Black Men Build program, I try to carry those values with me everywhere I go. So we usually ground this program with a values pledge. See, we're being joined at the perfect time by Dr. Jerry Ball, my co-host on this journey.
Peace, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. You are here in the perfect time for us to go through the values pledge. So I'll start with one, and then we could just cycle down Jared, Sundiata, Two Black, and then I'll read 5 and we can close it out. So first value, of course, is that we are critical thinkers. Jared?
We are curious about this moment.
Dr. Sundiata?
We're coming together to take an active, responsible role in freeing our communities.
Black?
We are transforming to meet the moment.
And finally, we are bonded with Black women and all Black people in the fight for true freedom. Black people who choose to fight for the enemy or use our struggle for personal and financial benefit need not apply. And so I want to carry those values with us, but also explain what we're talking about when we say the Black atheist tradition. So what are the qualities that make that up? Because not everybody within this tradition will identify as atheist. We're going to start with our identities at the beginning of this. But the way we define it is, one, we're rejecting colonizer capitalist religions and fighting the destructive impact on the colonized, especially the African diaspora. That includes indigenous ancestors like Cha-Jua, Deborah Clark, George Jackson, Richard White, James Baldwin. We're also exploring the social experience of non-belief. That's deconversion stories, challenging supernatural or faith-based claims, philosophical debate, scientific inquiry, and secular morality. And then third, and arguably most importantly, we are sharpening the dialectical materialist method. So if you look in the show description, you will see our previous episodes. Again, this is episode 6. So if you're new to the program, make sure you go back and check those out. Now, I'm going to ask everybody to identify what you say your spiritual or not lack of spiritual beliefs are, right? So Jared and I identify as atheists, but we got to check with our guests, see what label y'all feel comfortable claiming. And then I thought I'd have a fun question. Do y'all have a favorite gospel song? Because I know some of us grew up in the church, even if we ended up away from there later on in life. So we could popcorn it around, start with you two Black. You got a favorite gospel song? And then how do you identify when people ask your religious beliefs?
Favorite gospel song? I'm not good with favorites of anything, so this is always a tough question. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite. I mean, yeah, it's not that there's none I don't like. I just don't think there's there's one that stands out.
What about one you had to hear?
I mean, maybe like this is a stereotypical one, but like maybe this is just what's coming to my head, like Brighter Day, Kirk Franklin. You know, like musically, that's a cold one. In terms of what I identify, I mean, I remember coming across the term atheism because, and what that is you just simply don't care about the existence of God one way or the other. I think I remember when I was in college, I was talking to somebody. I have a lot of pastors around me in life, but I was talking to somebody who I'm good friends with who was eventually went to seminary, and we were talking about theology, and at some point I was just like, I genuinely just don't really care about this question. Like I don't have any investment in it one way or the other. So that would fall under it tends to fall under atheism, but it's a little different because I'm not even interested in arguing about it. I just simply don't care. Like that would be the category I fall under. Yeah.
Fair enough. Dr. Sundiata, how about you?
Well, I consider myself to be a historical materialist. Thus, I had the philosophy of dialectical materialism, which puts me in the atheist category. I have two favorite gospel songs, or maybe only one of them is actually a gospel song. The Edwin Hawkins singers, "Oh Happy Day,"
Mm-hmm.
will be singing when we defeat capital. Or I should say my descendants will be saying. And Billy Paul had this cut called War Gods that I think has some interesting things to say.
I like those answers. Oh Happy Day is a classic, no question. I'm trying to remember, do you know if that episode of Fresh Prince where they went to church, was that the song Will Smith like fell out singing? I'm trying to remember if it was like This Little Light of Mine or that one. I think it was Oh Happy Day, and he like falls to the ground.
Sister Act 2 is what really popularized that song, like for a new generation with Lauryn Hill and all of them.
That's what I was thinking about too. Okay, it might
have
been
so much so that they brought it back in this is too much pop shit, but like they brought it back on The View, and Whoopi Goldberg directed them, but somehow Lauryn Hill wasn't there for that. But they brought back everybody else that was there to sing that song. Oh, Happy Day.
Late. She was.
I'm gonna have to
late.
age. I only remember the original when it came out. Edwin Hawkins singers, brother.
Okay. And Jared, how about you?
Yeah, I actually have a couple. I really actually love gospel music, and so one that I like to always mention because I think it's funny that I was introduced to it in years and years ago in my brother's car while we were on tour introducing then Ben Chavis Muhammad as the Southern Regional Minister to the Nation of Islam. And we were riding around and listening to a lot of gospel. And in that car, I remember hearing, and I don't know the version of it. It's a live performance of the angels in heaven done sign my name. I don't know the name of it. Lord knows I've been changed. Lord know I've been changed. The angels. So that one, and then just I actually really love that song, but the timing of it, where I was introduced to it, was somewhat comically perfect. I really like that whole Pastor T.L. Barrett and the Youth Christ Choir live album stuff. Nobody knows. Is that the name of the song? Yeah, I think so. And then of course my favorite was at the end of the Five Heartbeats, where Eddie Kane Jr. sings. Oh man.
Is it this?
That's one of them. That's one of the songs from Pastor Barrett, the T.L. Barrett album. Yeah, but the song I'm thinking now, I just went blank on it. And we were even Greg Levy sang it on Saturdays with Renee last week. It'll come to me, but that song,
Okay.
because it's so powerful at the end of that Five Heartbeats, where he comes out and sings with the choir and reveals his having transformed and saved himself, and I'm angry that I feel like holding on. Exactly. I feel
Roots and
like
bark.
So I love that. So yeah, man, I listen to it. I could listen to gospel all day. I like gospel.
Another one rang down on me, just came to my head. Thing about
that's a
gospel
good one.
music is there's so many different renditions, and that's the beauty of it. There's so many.
And now that I found the gospel go-go bands,
Yeah.
it's a wrap. Now I'm all I'm good.
Yeah, Rain Down on Me is a good one when I was in choir, because every section gets to go crazy.
Yeah.
On that one. That's a great choice. All right. So us heathens, we're a little cultured. Mine is basic. I think the generations is so funny what y'all said, but it's like Kirk Franklin for me as well. Revolution. I've been revisiting that one more and more because I'm like, this song. He was on the song. He was close. He's so close with that song. So those are some of my favorites. I see some great ones in the chat as well. Yeah, the melodies from heaven, absolutely. So,
Yep.
Yeah, you already know.
Not the Florilla version either. Not that version. But.
Oh, the gospel rap album Glorilla dropped.
Yeah, that Glorilla version didn't hit for me. But
is the Negro National Anthem? What does that fall under as a genre? Would that be
the wrong one? The one that should have been the Garvey song should be the anthem.
Okay, but I actually
No.
I like the Negro National
Come on, man.
You like that whole thing about begging to be American? Come on, man.
Wait, where's that? Wait, I gotta pull up the lyrics.
Listen to the I know everybody only knows the first verse, but listen to the song. It's like
I know all of the verses. There are some politicals, but as a song, there's not even that is horrible.
It's so bad your audio won't even let you talk it out.
Your audio's going in and out.
Your mic knows.
Y'all got me. See, now I gotta get the receipts. Hold on.
I ain't giving Garvey no credit.
It's a hymn. Yeah, somebody says it's a hymn.
I'm gonna break Another one that no one probably considers a gospel song, but I do. Many Men by 50 Cent.
That's
Like,
my
if you
new
listen,
favorite.
if you listen to it, that sounds like as someone who grew up in church, it sounds like a gospel song. If you just listen to the way it's actually structured and melody and the way he's singing, and
Hold on, I gotta bring this up in the background.
So
yeah,
we're breaking up every.
I'm telling you, bro, your
Bro,
mic
Dr.
it don't even want to let
your
you
mic
hear
is
it.
going out. You
It don't even want to let you say it.
Okay, let me out these headphones and stuff.
Yeah,
No.
it might have just been me. That's echoing. Jesus would have loved Eddie Manny. I mean, not wrong.
see,
All right, where are we?
You're back. You're back. So
Am I
okay,
back?
you're back.
Okay,
To
good.
defend, lift every voice along with me from Jared's slander. So where's the America? Where's the pro-America?
I mean, somewhere in there, it's like, you know, where
no. There is a line that we could do without, but let us be clear in terms of the overall sentiment and the way you know. Look, I do a thing in my class, every class, right, where I have students go through. We play and listen to, and then we interrogate the lyrics of the American Capitalist song, right? What is it? Star Spangled Banner, and then we compare and contrast it with Lift Every Voice and Sing. And students immediately see the progressive nature and the hopeful character of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and they contrast it with the racist, militaristic song Star Spangled Banner. So,
well, when you compare it to that, yeah. I mean, when you compare it to that, yeah. But so for instance, true to our God, true to our native land. So what is the native land? What land are we saying we claiming nativity to?
No,
I'm
whoa. That's an empirical question, and you're making the leap to say that by native land they mean the state. They don't necessarily say the state. We don't know that they're talking about just the place they were born. I don't know that they mean the state. It is a questionable line. I'm not going to defend it, but I'm not going to go where you go with
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But the Garvey song is just horrible as a song.
Why? Because of the
God, it's
tune or the
horrible.
lyrics?
The lyrics are terrible.
Okay.
And it's Garvey.
Hey, I'm more in line with that. Yeah. So I'm so serious. As a kid, I swore that was referring to Africa. So that's really interesting, Jared. I never read it as America. That's so interesting.
And in the
Even if that's
context
what it
of
was
where it's,
intended as.
but in the context of how it's performed and who wrote it and why it was written, it's not a Pan-African return, and it's never meant to be that when it's sung today. And no one ever says let's sing this song as an anti-American return home or return to a Pan-African. Like, it's never done that way.
It is about struggle, though, Jared. It is about struggle. There's
what
no way
kind
to
of
get around
struggle?
that.
What kind of struggle? It's not an armed struggle. It's not a vicious. It's not a fight. It's a singing song. Can we please be American struggle?
Come on, man. You had this tendency to go too goddamn far.
I do not take that as I take that as the
Put your
ultimate
lyrics
compliment.
up.
That is the ultimate
your
compliment.
lyrics
Thank you, Dr. Sundiata. I appreciate that.
so you're saying it's a backwards
I'm in the
hashtag
wrong
song?
direction.
It's an absolute backwards hashtag
Is that what
song.
you're trying to say?
I knew you were about to say it was some ADOS shit.
I knew that's where it was going.
No. Jerry got some bad ADOS news this morning about Black Panther. That's why.
Again, that's true too. But what is the dark past that we need to get to overcome if our history begins before slavery?
Well, that's why I thought
the song starts our history with enslavement.
You know exactly what the dark past is.
That's my point.
The dark past is enslavement.
Right.
And you absolutely. Why do you think we're fighting for reparations if we're not trying to overcome that? Now, I
That's a
wouldn't.
whole separate discussion. That's a whole that why are we fighting for reparations would be that could be a whole other debate and discussion that I think, but
Okay, let me say this to you, brother. Here's the problem. See, ADOS creates a certain kind of serious error in that they want to claim that they are indigenous to the Americas and they are patriots of the U.S. empire, right?
as
Those
does that
people who
anthem.
claim to be Africans, right, create another error in that they are ahistorical. You cannot be in a place, you cannot create a culture from hundreds of Africans, right? Live in a place for 400 years, create autonomous institutions, and not be different. We are a particular African nationality, just as the Jamaicans, the Nigerians, and so forth. We're a particular African nationality, and to try and subsume us as if our ultimate destiny is simply to return to the continent. No, our destiny is to build a
I'm telling
state
you, your
and
mic is
contribute to the destruction of capital. My mic is clear this time, isn't it? Because
no,
I'm
but
correct.
no, but so we could debate this. That so I'm not. You've misrepresented my argument a little bit, but the to suggest that the
Rightly
anthem.
so.
To suggest that the Negro national anthem points black people to a radical,
I
even
didn't say
revolutionary.
that. I didn't say that. I said that it points to struggle. It honors struggle. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying that as a song. See, in other words, there are some things that we make political decisions on, but when something is just so obviously lacking in creativity, like the Garvey song, we can't go. We're people of culture, man. We, we do so much great work in terms of songs. There's no way we can take something that's just poorly constructed and just
Well, we
horrible
would have to go through and
lyrics.
demonstrate. You acknowledge that even in your method in the class, you don't include a review of the Garvey song. You compare the Negro National Anthem to the Star Spangled Banner, which sets up, in many ways, I would argue, a false dichotomy. It makes it easy to present one as better than the other, but you don't include a review of the Garvey song.
But we do
So
the
so
Garvey song later. That's the first day of class. I do
I'm
the
just
Garvey song when I get
I'm
to
only
the new
responding to what you
Negro
said.
movement.
I
And
can
guess
only
what?
respond to what you said, not
Nobody
to what you
likes it.
would eventually get
I
to at
know,
some point. So,
I know, but
but
but the
but my
point
point,
is,
even for today, we're not making that comparison to the Garvey song either. And it was just my point. And again, we obviously we don't have to agree. I'm not a fan of the Negro National Anthem. And that's why I think unconsciously so few black people in this country truly glom onto it, because it's unconsciously understood that this isn't it. This ain't it. This ain't the song we need. This isn't the struggle, the form of struggle we need.
okay, that misread of history that you just did. First of all, there's a period in which, when we were in control of our institutions, people sung, lift every voice and sang as you can call it the Negro, but it quickly became the Black national anthem. And up through the era of Black Power, we sung it in those institutions that we controlled, right? It has faded for the same reason that other aspects of our culture and of our movement have become weaker and less grounded in the traditions of our people. So to say that people don't know it today, what do they know today that one would call revolutionary? That
No,
one
that's a
would
good
even
point.
call
I'm just
just
saying that this isn't
right.
revolutionary. And I'm saying the reason that it hasn't been grabbed onto is not because it was revolutionary and therefore suppressed, as I would argue is the case with other content and arguments and analysis. It's just because it's welcomed. Everybody, it's welcomed anywhere. No one would discount or say you can't sing it. It's just not. It doesn't move people in the way that I think you've been moved by
Did
it,
you
and
grow up
I've
in the
never been
church?
moved by it.
Did you
So
grow
I,
up in the church?
no, I've already said that though.
Okay, good, because that's a point, right? Here's what I'm saying to you, that up through the mid 70s, maybe the late 70s, black folks in the churches, in the schools, at HBCUs, we sung Lift Every Voice and Sing because
We
we
still sing it at
recognized it
Morgan, and that's my
as
point.
struggle. We
That is my
recognize it
point.
as struggle, right? And what I'm going to say to you is this: you find a song that is better in terms of speaking to the history we have gone through, right? And that points toward a hopeful moment. And you won't find one. I've gone through, when I was a, you like this. When I was in my early 20s, I was arguing that we should replace Lift Every Voice and Sing with one of Gil Scott Heron's songs, right? But that was my youthful, I'd call it my youthful unserious period where I didn't really think deeply. You don't just throw stuff out.
Okay, so I'm even as I approach 55, I'm in my youthful, not thinking deeply
No.
moment. So I hope
No,
to be
no, no, no,
forgiven
no.
as
You
we
got
move
other
on,
errors.
and I look forward to the conversation we have today.
We are
All right,
about
let's
to.
get
This is
to
a
it.
great.
Let's
This is
get
a
to it,
great.
my brother.
I'm actually not like that at all. I love this. So I was being messy, yo. That's why I asked that question. I knew this would happen. I wanted to um, move us into the discussion about our reading today, internal colonialism, but just I think y'all were already getting at the complicated nature of this song, right? Because I hear what Jared is saying, like there isn't an explicit clarity around our identity as Africans. And there is a like an openness, like a vagueness to it, where I, as a child, am hearing this, but as Sundiata saying in church, and I'm like, oh, okay, one, because Dr. King said church Sunday is the most segregated day in the country. So I was just living in my internal colony. We are not singing the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance, which I had to do every single day at school. So it's fundamentally like shifting me away from, well, the
Mm-hmm.
normal kind of consciousness. Even in Black schools, they do Pledge of Allegiance and things like that. So I'm being shifted into something separate. I do think that in Florida, where there's lots of bans on woke and so, quote unquote, history, the Negro National Anthem is a problem because it does directly bring us to slavery and the struggle to overcome slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So even that, I do see it as being repressed because it naturally makes Black people see our history as a separate stream, either in the American project or in something separate. If you see Native land as Africa, like I did, but the history I thought was really interesting. Which talks about James Weldon Johnson graduating Atlanta in 1894, returned to Jacksonville, becomes principal of the first high school for African Americans in the state of Florida, and then they sought to write a poem. So what you're saying, Jared, is like true. It's the dialectics of it, right? This
Yeah.
poem was in commemoration of Abe Lincoln's birthday, just like Black History Month was on Abe Lincoln and Frederick Douglass's. So it's the dual nature of it. Like Black History Month was to honor Frederick Douglass and
Mm-hmm. And
Abe Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln.
So it's like it's always gonna. So I see there your point. Like it's not fully in the Pan Africanist revolutionary nationalist camp, but I also say that it points us to the internal colonialism theory that we are a separate nation, and then how it was spread to Sundiata's point was that it was the Great Fire of 1901, people moving with the Great Migration. And then Johnson wrote that school children of Jacksonville kept singing it, then went to other schools, Black schools, segregated schools, and sang it, became teachers and taught it to other children. Within 20 years, it was being sung all over the South and some parts of the country. So I do think, regardless of where we land on the song, it is a great encapsulation of what we're about to get to with internal colonialism. So that being said, thought we could shift real quick to get us started into Intro to Afro-American Studies, a People's College primer. I've mentioned it a few times here. I absolutely adore this book. But Jared, Sundiata, I think you both taught it. So I wanted to ask, well, I know Sundiata, you helped contribute, I think. So I wanted to ask y'all's relationship to this book. Where'd you find it? And how do your students feel if they ever get exposed to it? So things like that.
I didn't contribute to the writing of it. When I joined People's College, now the volume that I used was Intro Blue, which I believe is the volume before this one, and it includes a series of primary documents, but it's essentially the same historical narrative and analytical structure, right? And I never taught it after I stopped teaching at a community college. You know, I got my first job at 24 teaching at a community college, and I used Intro Blue, and it had a very powerful impact on students. And certainly it was an entree to a materialist analysis that the book was rooted in, and it was an entree to historical materialism, specifically in the way in which they did the periodization. So I think that there's some, it's very useful. And in fact, I would argue that for internal PE, for community organizing, it would be the text that I would use, right? I wouldn't use it for college students today because I think there's some one you have to pair it with an actual history book because it's a sociological work and its historical analysis ain't at the top tier of historical analysis because it's a work of sociology. Um, but that said, it was certainly pivotal in my development, as was being a member of People's College, but I didn't contribute to that production.
Got it. Thanks for that clarification. Jared?
I have no relationship to it, and admit I have to admit I had not even seen it until you sent it for this show. So it's new to me entirely.
No, you have it, Jared. You just forgetting.
Well, I may
I've
have
seen
it, but I've not used it, and I never opened it.
Okay.
I don't, or at least I don't remember. So that
What
that
about
could
an
also be a
earlier
problem.
version?
No,
Because
I've
there's
never.
like 6 versions of it. There's a blue, a green, a red. There might even be a black.
Yeah, no, I just somehow missed this entire project, unless I just don't remember. I mean, that, which is technically a possibility, maybe a pretty good possibility, but I have no memory of it. In fact, though, now that you said what you said, I'm wondering, and I'm curious, is because it seemed, I haven't read it very closely, but it seems outlined and set up very similar to, for instance, Karanga's intro, which I've often thought was really good. Are you saying that is
Oh,
also,
really?
yeah? So you're saying that that's not good as an introduction, as an overview and an introduction to the field? I thought Karanga's book is actually really good. Well, I used to, at least. It's been a while since I've used it, but I used to think it was actually a pretty good intro. But I never thought of it in terms of it being history versus sociology. So I hadn't thought of it in that way. I just thought of it as an introductory text to the field of Black studies, which again I thought was good. But so anyway, yeah, I'm new to this and enjoying it.
So let me give this bit of history. There's the moment in the late 70s, early 80s in which Abdul and Karanga debated the various texts. I believe Abdul wrote a review. Well, actually, I know Abdul wrote a review because I read it and contributed a small bit to it of Karanga's intro. And Karanga wrote a critique of, I think, Intro Blue,
Hmm.
the predecessor to this. One of the things that sticks with me from Abdul's critique of Karanga's intro is Abdul said the only numbers in there are page numbers, meaning that
Oh.
Karanga does not deal with any quantitative information, doesn't use the census, no primary documents. Karanga is an ethicist, and I appreciate his incursion into ethics and philosophy, but let's be honest, that book is a series of reviews of a field, of the various subfields in African American history. It is not a book that should be used in teaching an intro to African American studies course. You know,
That's wild. I have to go back and look at it because I honestly don't
Yeah.
think it's at all any different, and certainly not worse than Al Mat's most recent book, which I just finished using, which I've been using recently. Like in terms of a breakdown in the history of the field, I just don't.
So can I interject?
Yeah, I feel like because I'm speaking specifically and only to Karenga's volume on the intro to Black
Yeah.
Studies, not his other work.
So am I. So am
so
I.
yeah,
So,
that's
no, this is-
wild. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
no,
is great.
I never used it. Wouldn't use it.
So, to Black, remind me to come back to you about your exposure if you've seen this before. So, I'm going to recommend two things. I'm going to recommend one, Sundiata, your interview with Karenga on this channel, because that's a good starting point for this. And then Dr. CBS had an interview with you where y'all talked about how y'all teach intro to Black Studies classes.
Mhm.
And this came up. And CBS, Jared, to your point, said that she does like Karenga's work because it talks about certain things like culture. But what I talked about last week with Layla, or last episode with Layla, and what we mentioned was that one, that critique by Abdul is hilarious because it's absolutely true. The only numbers are page numbers. So I would say it is the difference between a cultural nationalist wing of Black Studies that I've been talking about versus the dialectical and historical materialist wing of Black Studies. So they both approach the field, but
Where is that? And so again, I'm sorry, but where is the quantitative and dialectical analysis in Abkalimat's work, particularly his new one, that is
I'm not speaking to
so
the new one.
revelatory as opposed to what Karenga did in terms of introducing the field? Because Karenga does acknowledge that there is a Marxist, tradition in the field. He's not giving it a glowing review or maybe an honest review, but Al-Kalimat leaves out entirely anything about African-centered work, and at least Karenga has taken the time to learn Medunetter. So I mean, whatever I might think of anything else, like I just find that, and then they would both be criticized, as was Al-Kalimat recently in my class, for being too insufficient on updating LGBTQ and women.
Absolutely. But here's what I would say is this. I'm only comparing Karenga's intro text to that series of texts, intro blue, intro red.
Okay.
That Abdul's new work, I haven't read it and don't plan to.
Oh, damn. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Baba Abdul, you're still welcome on the platform. You're welcome on the program. I don't want to. What I will say is, Jared, to your point, there is a lot of actual data and like material analysis in Abdul's thing. That's why I was drawn to it compared to Karenga. Because if you talk about like gender and class, Karenga's work is insufficient, like just straight up on the class question and on the gender question. Abdul needs to be updated, but he actually provides a material analysis of where patriarchy comes from in our community by talking about land contracts in the South and the nature of the family. And then even in Intro Blue, you get a lot of primary source documents from people who do that work. So Shadow of the Plantation, Dark Ghetto by Kenneth Clark. So the one, drawing on other primary sources of researchers, I think is a huge part. And then two, as we'll see with this, he's pulling numbers on like the top 4 denominations of Christianity within our community. That's the stuff that's more useful to me when I'm trying to see what is this going to look like in my actual neighborhood, that kind of thing. But Too Black, you've been quiet for a minute. Had you ever heard of this book? What do you think of the reading when you were able to look at it?
Yeah, I'd heard of it. I think it's one of the texts I think I've read. I never had read the one on the Black Church. I never read to that point. I think I'd read it for read excerpts for certain other writings. I appreciate it. I thought it was a relatively balanced take on the Black Church. I think sometimes it swings too far one way or the other. Either people turn the Black Church into this inherently revolutionary outlet across the board, which I don't agree with. But then I also don't think it's solely just a place of reactionary conservative behavior either. So I felt like they were able to strike that balance, but did it through like an historical analysis relative to what was you know, I like Sundiata said, it's sociology, so you're not getting like you know, like the deep dive necessarily, but for a synthesis, I thought it was decent.
Yeah, word. And I'm gonna switch just so people can see what we're referring to. So this is intro green, that they're talking about. So there are multiple editions of this, how it was developed over time, multiple volumes. Intro green was what I started with, and it's a short primer. You can see over here it's only 80 pages, but really it's like 50 or so. And it's sociology, but it's based on questions. And I mention this because like during Black History Month, reading US history books in school, right? It's very poor explanation of the Black experience. And then from there, it doesn't answer kind of how people approach history, which is with questions, like major questions about their origins or their background or about what's going on. And so the way Intro Green is structured is really like, okay, so what is Afro American studies? Like, how do we study Black history? So even the approach, is it a series of Black firsts? The Black first astronaut, the first Black woman to be a lawyer, the first Black, or is it a study of our experience as masses of people, as laborers, um, as you know, chattel slaves, things like that, right? And it goes through each one, like historically through periods. But how did Africa develop before the Europeans came? How do we define the modern period of history? What was the triple character of African slavery, so on and so forth? Going on into these social questions: what is nationalism? What are the problems faced by Black women? Has education worked for Black people? I think Karenga has a broad kind of survey as well, but a lot of those questions I think are not like directly engaged. And then as Two Black said, with a balance, so what I call like a dialectical and historical materialist point of view. So this is intro green, and it's more just it's got a short kind of paragraph describing answering the question. It goes through key concepts and then it gives readings for each one. And so I think it's just very, very useful for that reason alone. It gives you like a roadmap if you want to study more. And then Intro Red is that kind of built out into its own textbook. And so that's what we're pulling from today. And so instead of it just being short paragraph answers and then a collection of other readings or an annotated bibliography, it tries to actually, like a textbook, work its way through and answer those questions from Intro Green. And so what we read today, y'all, as you work your way through, I think all of these are great. I think the historical periodization is super important. So it starts with our experience in pre-colonial Africa, moving into the slave period, the rural period, and then the urban period. And what we're going to talk about now, which could be called the neo-colonial period. And so what we talked about was chapter 10, which is religion and the Black church. So as we're about to get into a discussion of, as we work through, I thought it highlights, or it begins by highlighting, a primary contradiction when it comes to the Black church. So this is a quote from Gary Marx, Protest and Prejudice, 1969. I think there's no relation there, but who knows? The relation between religion and political radicalism is a confusing one. On the one hand, established religious institutions have generally had a stake in the status quo and hence have fostered conservatism. The otherworldly orientation of the masses, particularly as expressed in the more fundamentalist branches of Christianity, has been seen as an alternative to the development of political radicalism. On the other hand, as a source of both universal humanistic values and the strength that can come from believing one is carrying out God's will in political matters, religion has occasionally played a positive role in movements for radical social change. So I think here is the primary contradiction of the church, of its function. So I wanted to open up the discussion of the chapter with thoughts on this quote, or anything that stood out to y'all when y'all read it about the Black church's role. Now we can keep moving through some of the things I thought were interesting as quotes.
Now, quickly, are you just asking our response to the general article, or are we talking about the Black church historically,
Well,
contemporarily? Like, yeah, just curious where you're trying to land with it.
um, Well, I know it goes through the periods. So I guess the role of the Black church, and then in the context of that previous quote, which is that it serves as sometimes a way to keep the masses in place with this kind of otherworldly orientation, but then it also
Hmm.
can, inform our values. And then when people think they're carrying out the will of God, it can play a positive role in our movements. And I think we could start that as early as the slave revolts, Harriet Tubman, Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, those kinds of things. And then we could move that through all the way to the freedom movement, Black power, Black liberation theology, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, what I appreciated about that was what first sets me off to what this history is one, the Black church is viewed like universally one way or the other. Often, not in this text, but how people talk about it. So this text gets into what there's different size churches. They are shaped differently by their geographical location. They're shaped by migration. They're shaped by obviously just general historical conditions, which is which has always been kind of how I felt about it. Versus this view that it just had this inherent trait to it that was static, that just holds throughout history. And I don't think there's any evidence that backs it up, even regardless of what side you fall on. Honestly, I just don't think that really holds up. Um, so church emerges out of the conditions as opposed to church producing the conditions, which is often what we get. So we'll get that church somehow like arrives through slavery, and then Black people put everything into it, in one way or the other, and then you get arguments that it's produced this strong political character, and then you get other arguments that it's produced this backwards character, and he teases through some of that even in this piece in terms of the view that that whether we held on to some of our culture through slavery or whether it was completely demolished, and how there was different schools of thought on that as well. And even though E. Franklin Frazier took more of the demolished perspective, he still had to acknowledge like the role that it played, both good and bad, you know, in a dialectical sense. So I appreciated that. And then I think as they walk through the history, I mean, this is only going up to basically into the 70s, really primarily deals up into the 60s. So there's also another 50 plus years, that like we're gonna have to fill in today. That I think is even worse. And I was listening to a Reverend Wright, Jeremiah Wright, lecture that he gave at here actually in Indiana, the same place we had the conference actually at the Christian Theological Seminary, and he went through 7 decades of preaching. It was a memoir type sermon. Like obviously he wasn't able to give like the full context of Black preaching, but he walked through, how he saw it evolve and how prosperity gospel pops up. But he does kind of situate it in some semi. I don't think Wright would consider himself some kind of historical materialist, but he does situate it in a historical period as something that pops up. So this text doesn't even really like prosperity gospel is just creeping up at the time this text is even being written. So that's like a whole other thing that I think goes to the neo-colonial angle that we can discuss as well. But I did just appreciate like it was highly critical of the church, um, but it wasn't this kind of like all of our problems come from the church thing. Which again, I don't. As someone who grew up in church, doesn't go to church, I could see kind of the different sides of it. But I think like they nailed it. Church eventually had to compete with other things in Black life, and I think sometimes we don't like to admit a lot of reasons Black church became popular. I'm not trying to knock on people's faith. I'm just saying a lot of it was just the historical conditions where it became the primary thing, as this was the primary outlet that a lot of people had. As those things changed, it had to compete with other parts of life, other ideas, other outlets that just makes it not quite as central as it once was.
It does talk about, to your point, it does mention Father Divine and Daddy Grace as
Yeah, the cults. Yeah.
and I thought immediately of the bookends of Creflo and TD Jakes, like they're the precursors. But yeah,
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. I think the chapter by People's College, led by Abdul Kalimad, is far more sophisticated than the quote by Gary Marx. I think the quote by Gary Marx has a lot of simplicity in it. So in the chapter, Abdul takes up this question about the otherworldliness. And one of the things that becomes clear, right? All of the leaders of what we used to think of as the major three revolts, Vasey, Prosser, and Turner, what's more otherworldly than Gabriel Prosser believing that he's the reincarnation of Samson? What's more otherworldly than Nat Turner saying that he looked in the sky and blood dripped down on the corn, and he saw that he was tasked with taking up Jesus's mission, and we're talking about the second mission, right?
Amen.
Which was to turn brother against brother, sister against sister, and lead a revolutionary movement. That's otherworldly. So just because something is otherworldly doesn't mean that it can't have a revolutionary character in a social sense. Maybe not, I mean, obviously not philosophically, but socially. And I don't think Marx really captures the duality of the otherworldliness. He's focused on contrasting the otherworldliness to a practicality in terms of struggle. And I think that, Rasta, Walter Rodney, come on now, the Rasta religion is all the way out there,
Mhm. I
all
want to
the
push.
way out
I want to
there.
push back a little bit though, based on the quote, just
Okay.
specifically at the end. So he says, it's a source of value, so it can create a value system, social cohesion, which the chapter argues. And it says, and the strength that can come from believing one is carrying out God's will in political matters. So everything you described, I think, was that essentially. That's
Okay,
what
I
Marx is
think
saying.
you're right. I
Yeah,
think you're
that's
right.
what
I
I'm saying. I think he's
overstated
saying,
it.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, Abdul chose the quote probably,
But
but
it's a
that's
small,
yeah.
you know what I mean? It is at the end, but it is much smaller
All the
than the
Marxes
way it
get defended
begins.
around here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my so my point would be to because we talked about this before, right? It's people who don't believe can't deny that Harriet Tubman, was called Moses, right, for a reason, and that these people were looking towards something. Same with our folks who like Malcolm, Brother Malcolm in Islam, right? So I agree. I just think they fuse their ideas about God's will and their purpose on earth with the political destiny and trajectory they're trying to aim us toward. So that's it. I would say that my origin point is just different, but I can see when we talk about liberation theology, this is the core of it. Like, are you going to, and someone in the chat mentions like what church is supposed to do, and we already, in a dialectical sense, argue against supposed to, right? Versus what Two Black said, what conditions created it in the first place. So it says religious institutions have generally had a stake in the status quo. So right there, the otherworldliness can be used to preserve the status quo,
Mhm.
crystallize it, or you can interpret it as a way to go against the status quo. And so I think that's what this chapter and the Black church has always had to contest with. And if we can get into some more,
Yeah, one other
go ahead.
thing. They name it as a contradiction, but I think I'm at to look at the passage in terms of the contradiction of what you just named, but I don't even know if it's a full contradiction in the sense that I think Christianity is set up to produce both. It's to produce like the folks who can
Yeah.
produce a liberation struggle, right? Who can lead a liberation struggle, but also to produce like a very conservative status quo politic. I don't actually think Christianity is in contradiction with that. I think that's actually if you want to say the contradiction is in the religion itself, not necessarily the Black church. If you want to name a contradiction,
Oh,
yeah.
you're on the right show.
I would agree with Two Black and say that religion is simply an aspect of culture, and any cultural institution can be bent toward revolutionary radical ends or can continue to serve to feed the status quo. What what I think is missing here, there's a tradition that begins in the late 19th century of Black Christian socialists. And there's no discussion of those folk. And that tradition, I would say, culminates with one of the pastors whose name is escaping me right now, an AME pastor of Quinn Chapel in Chicago, um, Reverend E. Ransom. He was Ida B. Wells' pastor, uh, and he's a clear socialist. And so there's that tradition, and I just wish that Abdul and them had centered that tradition, because Black liberation theology doesn't fall from the sky, as Mao would say, that there's a tradition that it builds on. And if we were to revisit those Black socialist preachers, we would have a different understanding, and it might help us understand why the AME bishops came within one vote of making James Cone's Black liberation theology official AME doctrine.
I didn't know that history. And yeah, if they talk about the black cults, I feel like that would have been relevant to bring up too.
Uh,
Um, I do appreciate the survey of how we talked about this before. The modal Black experience, the most common experience what most people are going to deal with when it comes to engaging the church in our community, because that tends to be my critique. You might have your radical, well, people could say that about everything, but I say there's issues with Christianity itself, as Stu Black has pointed out. And you can have your radical church, and it can be a small denomination or a small
yeah,
sect or whatever. But the way most people are going to engage this institution is not like that. But I
right.
do hear like how there would have been struggle, and maybe if they had gotten that one vote, we would have had a lot more of a
Yeah.
liberatory, field in the AME church. So I thought, to Jared was saying earlier, like when we get the Creflo Dollars, the TD Jakes, all of that, we do see their precursors here. So I thought the
Yes.
role of the pastor or the leader of the Black church is interesting, and how that's developed over time too. So this quote, talking about under slavery, again, my contradiction is your ancestors were not practicing Christianity, so it was forced onto us, and then we made do with what we had for social institutions. But because plantation owners did not allow organization to develop openly among slaves, an underground church, the invisible institution, emerged. Their religious practices of the slaves first, beyond the watchful eyes of the slave owner and overseers. So, too, like you were saying, like there's two extremes, like either the church is this or that. He also talks about in this chapter some of the extremes of, we either lost all of our Africanness and it was completely stripped, and we just became Christian bots like the white man, or the other version that I push back against, actually Christianity is like completely synergistic with our African traditions, and we didn't lose anything, and really like, so
Well,
I
that's
don't,
too far.
right. So either poll I think is a
Yeah,
little too
that's too
far.
far. Yeah.
It's way too far.
Yeah.
So even looking at how our
But
preachers were, our preachers were usually plantation folks, just like the rest of us. Some man who had a little education and had been taught something about the Bible would be our preacher. So, just a material reason why someone is selected to be a preacher. They know a little something more. They might have been able to figure out how to read, under master's nose, that kind of thing. And then because they have that skill, they might be a good orator, they become our preacher. When we had our meetings of this kind, we held them in our own way and were not interfered with by the white folks. So even that to me is a core material reason when you say Christianity is just something that Black people do, where we're God-fearing people, we're spiritual people, right? If the only possible way you had to have social meetings that were not under your master's view and surveillance was church, and it was still surveilled, then we're going to go to church. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's pretty obvious in terms of human behavior. The one place you have to actually have some sort of freedom when you're worked to death every day, you're going to find your way to it. So that's why I say we're kind of hostage situation here, right? It's not like you had other opportunities to develop social institutions in our community.
Josh, I want to push back slightly in this sense. When we think about something like Santeria, right? The common argument is that the shell is Christian, but the interior is African, right? And so when we talk about creolization, I would argue that the form, and the reason they say we had our meetings of this kind, and they're talking about the form reflected more of the survival of African culture. I'm not saying it's revolutionary. I'm just saying that it was a form that fit more with our cultural tradition, and that partly explains why most of us are Baptist and Methodist, and very few of us are Presbyterian and Episcopalian because of the African form, right? That those religious denominations were more amenable for us to mold and express our culture through. The other thing that doesn't really get into in this chapter is the question of the quasi-free and the churches that they built, right? They mention the denominations, but they don't talk about the practice. They don't talk about what's taught in those quasi-free churches. There's a reason why Richard Allen ends up leading the colored convention movement. There's a reason why the AME was at its core an anti-slavery church, but also a spot in which they recovered African history by going through the Bible and identify. So those are things. They don't solve the problem of religion, but they show the ways in which our people are constantly trying to gesture toward the more radical elements and the elements that fit more with our cultural tradition.
I don't disagree. I just think that there's so many fundamental contradictions to the shell
Yeah,
that it
yeah.
is perverting the interior, right? So, Santeria, voodoo, appreciate all those things, but the shell is like it's a container. It's limiting what those things can be, right? So, I mean, patriarchy is embedded in Christianity, no matter how you slice it. And so, this idea of maybe we have our African religions, but the man's going to be the leader. That's just there. It's going to be if you're in Christianity, like you're dealing with that. I know there are a lot of Black women who are in clergy or are trying to change that, but when there's explicit things in the text that speak against you being a preacher, right? You're just arguing with the source material at a certain point. So I agree. I think those things need to be explored. I also say there's so many fundamental contradictions to the ideology of Christianity that you're trying to bend African ways of being into it when maybe you should
But
just
not just
avoid it.
Christianity, Josh.
Oh, Islam,
Islam, all religions,
Judaism,
all of them,
Hinduism,
all of them,
Buddhism that some people try and claim, all of them. No,
all of them.
that's why we on this show. Um, to that point and to the numbers. So that was a question as well. Kwame Ture likes to speak about the first church that we formed. To Jared's point of like a native land is the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So the people identifying themselves as their motherland as African, as not American or not even Negro, but that doesn't become the number one denomination. So, two Black, I don't know what denomination did you grow up? I grew up Baptist. I'm not sure if you're Presbyterian or AME or anything like that. What was
I
yours?
grew up non-denominational with an apostolic leaning,
Got you.
so
Got you.
that would be the way I would define that. Yeah. So I mean, everybody was still passing out and doing that kind of like typical Black church stuff. Like I saw a lot of that. I wasn't around a lot of quiet people or anything, but it was technically non-denominational.
Yeah, that makes sense. So here, Abdul includes the five major, and I should not just say Abdul People's College, because I know there were others who
Yeah.
contributed. The five major Black denominations, and the National Baptist Convention being number one. I didn't even know this of
Mhm.
the USA and of America, so that's interesting that those are two separate ones. And then the AME Church being number two. I appreciated the number of pastors. This is what I mean by the numbers. This is very helpful for me to see just how many people were of a particular denomination. And then Sunday school members, I thought of that. And so there's reasons, because I always thought about that as well. I think it's pretty obvious, other than, my Caribbean folks who can go to Catholic church and hum for an
Mhm.
hour and drink wine was the only thing I thought was cool about that service. And it was short. Everything else, I'm like, well, it's short, but it's boring as fuck. So which is the trade-off here. Other than that, I think we all ended up pretty much in these denominations, and they offer reasons for why. So they said, first and foremost, Baptist and Methodist preachers were mainly uneducated and poor like the slaves. And so their appeal appeared to be more genuine and inviting. I think that's very important. Even speaking to the slave period that Fraser was talking about, where the pastors would be, again, people who just had a little bit of knowledge about the Bible, would be poor, would be slaves themselves. The emotionalism of Baptists and Methodists, right? It's not very sterile like the Catholic services, provided more of an outlet for the pent up feelings and emotions of the oppressed slaves than did more reserved practices of other denominations. And then the decentralized political structure of the Baptist denomination, with each church operating as an autonomous unit under the leadership of a local preacher, gave more real involvement to members and proved more appealing than the centralized structure of the Methodist Church or the Roman Catholic Church, where the Pope is your authority. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't think it necessarily answers why Baptist was more popular than AME, though. I'm not sure if y'all had any thoughts about that, but that was the only thing that I was a little confused about, because AME should fit these qualifications too, right?
Well, AME is not decentralized; it's a hierarchical structure.
Okay, didn't know that.
Yeah, like all Methodists is pretty hierarchical, but I mean, this is the what are the years that this is documenting the membership? Is that like
It's
what are these?
66.
Yeah,
That's 1966. They're saying that,
Yeah.
or they're
yeah,
okay. I
Well,
mean, I
probably
think some
technically 65, right? The book
yeah.
came out in
It
66.
says it
right,
right.
right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, technically, I mean, AME is started by free black folks. Slaves couldn't join AME, right? So, like I'm saying, there's a period of time.
No, 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 no. You had AME churches in the South, right? Then Mark Vesey was at the he built the AME church that fascist came and shot up, Dylan Ruth, right? So you had AME churches in the South. You had them in Missouri. You had them in the South, and you had these preachers who were preaching the anti-slavery message within that context.
But were those primarily slaves attending those churches, or were those primarily free blacks attending those churches?
Both,
Okay.
both.
Interesting.
Remember, what gets lost here is that about 20% of the enslaved are in urban areas, right? About 5% are enslaved to capitalist corporations. And then you've got about 15% that the plantation enslavers put into the city to make money for them. So they send the blacksmith to work in Richmond, right? Do other jobs, and of course, to get the money. And so you've
Hmm.
got those folk who have a bit more freedom of movement because they're in the urban environment. They're responsible for finding their own housing, and they interact with the quasi free because they immerse themselves in those institutions.
Right. So I'm asking a question. I guess so. So could the masses of slaves attend these churches? Because that my understanding was always these were primarily attended. I know there was some slaves, but primarily attended by free blacks. So I'm just trying to answer Laura's
Yeah,
question in
no, yeah,
terms
no,
of
no, no, no.
yeah,
Obviously, the numbers are what you're saying. I'm just
yeah,
saying that 20%, that's one in five. That's not insignificant,
right. No,
right?
no, 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 right.
That's all
I
I'm
guess
trying to say.
that's
But it is a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
minority experience. But remember, that's how we get the Vesey Rebellion,
Hmm.
right?
Right. I guess I'm thinking that there was always a like you said there was always a population of slaves that had freedom of movement. It depended on where they were at in terms of how much movement they could get. Because every state, or even before there were states, every colony wasn't the same. But people who are working on the fields, people who were primarily working within the plantation, on the plantation,
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess weren't really attending a lot of AME.
No, no, they weren't
Yeah,
attending churches led by black folks other than
yeah,
the quote invisible
right,
institution. They're
right.
in what they call the crow's nest at white churches, right? The
Hmm.
balcony.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank y'all. That answers a lot. And then thank you, Evelyn Aquino. Traditional Catholic Church was born, but the Caribbean Latino charismatic movement was much more aligned with Baptist churches, right? We are an African people. And so it makes sense that we would take the boring church and make it sound more like our thing.
As a quick aside, to prepare for this episode, I don't know. I like to torture myself. I watched some white church services. Man, that shit is terrible,
Oh.
man. It's like, and I mean straight up like those like white folks that got like tattoos and they don't ever dress, they never wear suits or anything, and they just playing
Oh,
the
the new
guitar
age?
all.
You talking about that new
Yeah, that
age?
shit's terrible,
No,
man. That shit is
brother.
horrible. Like,
Yo,
like,
definitely a casualty of integration. I know when some black people go to those churches, and
oh my
oh
god.
my God.
Yeah.
And they have and they got all this money, like so they got decent production and all of that.
Oh yeah.
But this shit is horrible. I'm like, why would anybody? And it's sad. It's like depressing too. Like none of it's inspiring. I'm like putting my beliefs or lack of beliefs aside. Like I'm like this shit is. I was like this would drive me to atheism at 5 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like I would never. There would be no struggle. You know, black people talk about struggling because we like the vibe of the church.
Yeah.
There would be
yeah.
none of that if I had to go to that shit. I'd be like, I'm out. I
That's how
understand
you
why
make
some
black atheists. Send them to white churches.
There you go.
I watched the documentary about the Hillsong Church and a couple months ago and thought something very similar. I was like, wait, they have all this money, they have all this access to all these celebrities. They even have a separate music production arm, and it's whack. It's
Terrible.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you traditional to where I know we're headed to settler colonialism and to imperialism. They have all the resources and none of the spices.
The seasoning.
None.
None of the
But
seasoning.
None.
Jared, it's a culture, man. This is where we had to give the cultural nationalists some credit.
Oh, no doubt, absolutely, I'm with it. That's
is whack.
100%.
Terrible.
I will.
Like,
Yeah, even to the music point, right? Like there's a centers discussion about the twins of gospel and blues, right? But even when we talk about the Kirk Franklin era, it's hip hop. Like Kirk Franklin is infusing hip hop into the gospel. And so it's going to sound better when I go to these. I haven't been, so let me not even say I've been like once or twice. But when I see these white churches, it is like soft Christian rock. Like that is what their version of the so it's no hip hop.
Yeah, that's the other
no
thing. It's not
song.
even good white music. It's like
No.
it's like they didn't even get it's
There's no
and
twin,
real
there's
quick.
no twin to punk or anything. It's just
I'm just looking at my clock. I just want to acknowledge, with a pun intended, how miraculous it is that we're seeing two black at an AM hour. So I just wanted to acknowledge the
it's pretty miraculous.
yeah, it's miraculous. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm happy. Thank you. So moving on to our next subject.
Hold up. Yipper
just-
said South Park did it better. I told you Yipper is my cousin. Yipper doesn't want to acknowledge it, but that's how I know we related. Because the South Park episode where they talk about where Cartman makes a bet that he can make he can get a #1 hit faster by turning gospel music into something popular, changing all the references to or the opposite. I think he did the reverse Ray Charles and took all of the secular music and put religious and changed all the references to love and sex to Jesus.
Nice, crazy. That's exactly how it would go. Agreed.
Yeah.
Just wanted to highlight, just as we move toward the end, if y'all haven't read Intro Red, again, I cannot recommend it enough. I think so many high school students would be enriched by reading it. It is pretty straightforward. It is advanced, it's rigorous, but at the same time, it is accessible, like completely. So when we talk about dialectical and historical materialism, that is the framework for addressing every single one of these topics: religion, culture, music, our labor. All of it is through this lens. And so I just wanted to say there are study questions. Again, this is for instruction, so you can follow through with that. And what ways did Christian religion help the slaves, and then help the slave masters? To Two Black's point, like the dialectical nature of all of this. It's not saying it's one or the other. So I would recommend these study questions. And again, it keeps to the spirit of Intro Green, with some supplementary readings. There's also the intro blue that Sundiata was talking about. I think that was volume 4, where there's direct historical documents that you can look at. So you're actually reading Fraser's analysis, you're reading Shadow of the Plantation, you're reading these things firsthand. So
real quick, Baba Sundiata, what did you come? Did we get a sort of a confirmation on what text you would suggest for an intro to Black Studies?
Yeah, the text that we used was, well, first of all, the main text would have been Stewart's Introduction to African American Studies, James Stewart's text.
Okay.
That I think it's by far the best text, and it's the most up to date as well.
Okay.
It's not a historical materialist, but it is a critical economic analysis. It does center political economy.
No, right on. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm gonna, yeah, because I'm looking to revamp my course, so I might look back at that. So thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
You're on mute.
thank you. Yep. So just wanted to highlight that text here and move it on to our next subject. So we're about to get into the next reading, which was Robert Allen revisiting the internal neo-colonialism thesis. So that's what we had today. Going to introduce a little bit about Robert Allen, but before that, I wanted to, similar to last episode, get some recommendations. So I, as I've said before, consider all 3 of y'all the dialectical materialist wing of Black Studies. I think you have all contributed books. I know, Dr. Sundiata, yours isn't out yet, but Jared, you and Two Black, on this subject, or that comes from this framework, whether it be I Mix What I Like, Myth of Black Buying Power, or Laundering Black Rage. And so, excluding those, which I think all kind of start from this framework, what would be 2 sources, and we're going to each give 2, that you would give somebody to understand internal colonialism as a concept? And let's just say a freshman at Howard who hasn't been kicked out of housing yet. Let's start there. What would you give that person? 2 things. It could be a reading, it could be a movie, it could be an interview to discuss internal colonialism.
So, since I refuse to be put in the box, I'm gonna give 3 things, Josh. So I'm gonna start with my first book, America's First Black Town, because I use the internal colonial thesis to analyze the relationship between the first all black town and the white county. Because I think you have to be very particular and specific, right? Because Kenneth Clark said the ghettos are colonies, not simply that black folk in the US are a colony. The second thing I would use is Robert Allen, because it remains by far the best. And then the third thing would be a film, and it would be The Spook Who Sat by the Door.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for that. And can you say what your upcoming book is?
I would
So
recommend
folks
the
know-
book on that. The book complementing the film too. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, and the book itself. Spook Who Sat by the Door.
That's
Yeah.
true too. Thank you, Two Black. My upcoming book, I'm still writing the epilogue. So, any rate, the title is "Our History is Like Our Hair Nappy."
Looking forward to it. Reviewing that on this channel. Two Black, Jared, what y'all got?
If you're ready, Two Black, you can go ahead.
Now go ahead.
I try to just to try to be not to, because Robert Allen obviously would, I think, be the, and not only the Black Awakenings, but the article that we reviewed for this, and I would even argue another article he wrote in 2010 on the subject. But so just in general, Robert Allen, but I mean, I don't know. You know, off the top of my head, not being prepared for this question, I would probably go back to Carmichael and Hamilton's Black Power as a source. And then I'll just, I can share it. But there's a new article that I'll just mention that I would want to use, that was just published in June of this year. And the authors I'm actually going to be interviewing at some point soon, forgive my pronunciation, Upasana Biba and Augustine Lau Montes have written an article called The Multiple Lives of Internal Colonialism in Sociological Forum. And it's a very, I think, I'd love to get all of your thoughts on it, but it's I think a very good introductory overview, not only of internal colonialism as it's been applied by Black people here, but broadly around the world, and some of the overlaps, differences, histories, debates. I mean, it's very well done. So I would probably even suggest that. And then beyond Spooked, I was trying to think, like, I don't know if we'd have to get maybe Intume or somebody to like get some third cinnamon here. I don't know of any other good movie suggestions that would really get to this. But yeah, those two. I'll just say those two sources for now.
Terry, we're always asking you. Revolutionary Notes by Julius Lester. Thank you very much. Baba Sundiata, I just want to, because I had a little role in that. I just want to say the people like the book title.
Well, let's be clear. I was using the word kinky, and Josh pointed out dialectically the contradictions. So I went with his suggestion.
I heard it's nappy. It's no, I can't.
The kinky could be kind of funny though, you know.
That's about, sounds like it's gonna be real funny when people pick
That
up.
could be
Yeah.
kind of funny. You know, a lot of double and triple entendres in that joint, you know.
Different genre. Yeah.
And did you know, I just sorry for this quick aside, but I just was reminded that he said in an interview on camera that the dude who invented the white, I believe, Jew who created Kinko's did it referencing kinky hair and the Jew fro that he thought he had as a youngin. So Kinko's as an industry was even making anyway. I don't know why that it's not
so
relevant to the it's just so random. It just popped into my head anyway. But anyway,
I don't know how we got here.
yeah, the kinky, the nappy, I don't know.
Yeah.
The kinky might be
Kinko's.
let that
Sounds
marinate
like a
for
new
one quick
slur.
second and have some fun with the book cover.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking some Parliament Funkadelic book. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the book, man. So
Thank you, brother.
Definitely. And then looking forward to that article, Jared, in that interview. Two Black, what about you?
Like Dr. Sundiata, I'm probably not gonna stick to two. Number one for me, outside of Robert Allen, that's like an easy one, is notes from African POW Journal. So these were written by prisoners, and I have 12 of them. There might be more, but I have at least 12 of them. A lot of these came out, I believe, in the 80s, and they're what gives us, like, for when people hear the framing even of political prisoners in terms of prisoners of war, political prisoners, and captured colonial, that comes out of an internal colonialism thesis that they struggled with behind bars. There's a lot of, and they wrestle with a lot of these questions. They wrestle with the question of the 13th Amendment. It's a much better analysis than the film. I'm sorry to hear there's going to be another one on the 14th Amendment, but they wrestle with a lot of these questions. So even when understanding prisons, they push back against the kind of, I guess, Marx, just the simple Marxist analysis, even though they're not rejecting Marx, but they reject the simple one that just situates us as workers, and they're like, and just says that the growth of, like, the prison industrial complex is just be due to surplus population. They're like, no, this is also a form of national oppression, right? Because you think about us as a nation. So we're not just being put in prison because there's just not enough jobs or something. Like that's part of it, but it's also hyper focused on us because it operates as a form of national oppression. Like this is the type of stuff that people in prison, we're theorizing. So I think there's and talk about being accessible. These are quick articles that exist within these journals that you can find online, and they deal with that. They deal with transforming the colonial mentality, and I think like that's why when folks say stuff like the best abolitionists, quote unquote, in terms of prison were prisoners. Like when you read this stuff, a lot of the abolitionist stuff's not even that good compared to when you read, because they wrestle with also in that particular piece transforming the colonial mentality. They wrestle with what it means to have done harm in your community, and how it's not enough to just say you're a revolutionary because you rebelled in the streets, because you stole from the corner store or something. Like there has to actually be a shift in how you think and how you approach the world to actually get to that revolutionary mentality. So I think a lot of this stuff in there, I mean, they'll also just have you read Mao, or they'll quote others, or they'll have other like essays from different revolutionaries. So I would say that I'm gonna shout out my co-author Rasul Mawat, his book Geographies of Threat and the Production of Violence. That book isn't directly like about internal colonialism, but I think when you read that book, I read it like a textbook. I always joke with him that he put it in columns. Literally, the book is in columns, so it feels like a textbook anyway. But the primacy of geography to even having a material analysis, I think sometimes we don't really use that enough. So even in that book, he argues that race isn't just socially constructed, but it's spatially constructed, because he's like, you have to actually put people in a place for those ideas about race to even hold up, right? If everybody lived everywhere else, these ideas that we have about a black man being this stereotype or that stereotype wouldn't hold up if you didn't have a colonial system that spatially says this is where people have to live, and they have a very particular relationship to the labor of whatever is needed by capital at that time, and understanding cities as an instrument of capital to even the way roads are built to move money in and out, so there could be a circulation of capital. So we're talking about colonialism. We are talking about geography. We're talking about where people physically live. We're not just talking about a mentality or just a label. It has to be manifested in the material. So I think that's a good book to read, even though he does have references to internal colonialism, but the book's not entirely about that, because he's dealing with colonialism going all the way back to the laws of the Indies, way back in 1506 and stuff like that. But I think that's a good book to ground, like in terms of thinking about how geography relates to it and why we live where we live. When people talk about gentrification, he's like, that's just city planning. Like that's just the nature and the cycle of how cities are built. It's not necessarily a special feature. And that's
The late
the
great
nature.
Dr. James Turner said that gentrification is colonial removal.
Yeah.
So right on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
colonial relocation.
Yeah. So like, and it's related to property value and emerging markets, and how you can come in and snatch a profit out of something by devaluing it. And so when people push back against internal colonialism as just being an analogy or something of that nature, it's the very devaluing of Black African people that is the surplus value. Right, the devaluing of it allows you to extract more value from that property, because you could say they lived here, move them out, and that's the actual value that you get out of it. Last one is a paper. I was at a conference. This is actually written by a white dude, but he was a labor organizer. He utilized a lot of the internal colonialism like theory. It was called this is actually a dissertation, the Corporate and Geographical Organization of Los Angeles Rent Plantation. But he has these, within his dissertation, he has these graphics that show in Los Angeles, that because so many black people are renters, he actually shows the extraction from neighborhoods that where people are being rented to, and how that money goes to the places of the folks who own those homes into other areas in Los Angeles, and the actual like renting economy allows for this major extraction of wealth from those neighborhoods into these absentee landlord neighborhoods, by them simply just owning the property. But it's a lot more complex than that. But it's another paper I would recommend people to read. So there's a few more, but I'll leave it. I think those are solid.
The BLA study guide would be one I forgot to mention too.
Yeah.
It has a nice little section.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll probably be revisiting that on this show for the Black August episode.
Last one. I think Black Scare, Red Scare, even though I don't think that was CBS's main thesis, I think it does a great job of laying out the theory as well. Because she talks about the relationship between the North and the South.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense, especially because they're doing communist history, and they also have this theory, as well as the RNA and other folks. I recommend.
I'm sorry. Last one. We got to admit the Black Belt thesis. Like that has
Reader?
to be. Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
The
I won't
per year thing.
Yeah, I won't mention the name. Yeah, but I reached out to somebody, a popular scholar who disagrees with the internal colonialism thesis, and invited them to be in discussion with me and Eugene, because Eugene has an approach in that book that is different from my approach, and then this third person disagreed with all of it, and they didn't want to do it, and I think that's unfortunate. So I just want to put out there in general that it's unfortunate that people don't want to have principled, engaged, and I would have thought fascinating discussions, even if not always on the same page. And I just think that's unfortunate. And but he does have the Black Belt thesis has its own approach. Yeah.
I'd argue you need to understand DHM to properly understand internal colonialism. But I like this Jack O'Dell's 1960s writing in Freedom Ways. Another Black communist who was purged from King's, I'd say, advisors or comrades or things like that.
Well,
also
let me
say-
say this, Josh.
Yeah.
There's actually a collection of Jack O'Dell's writings that includes the 4 internal colonial pieces that he did.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So Jack O'Dell. I wanted to point out, like, to Black's point, this is a theory that people are building on from communist and Black nationalist history in our communities, and so political prisoners in Bito Wawatu, things like that, have this analysis. But you'll even hear it from people like Dr. King, which is
Yes.
Wow. So again, like, people, I don't know who this person that you're referring to, Jared, is, but I think I'd be interested if they even knew Dr. King, or Jesse Jackson is somebody who says that we're in a time of colony. How, if you have that analysis, you then support the Democratic Party? These become the questions that we must ask ourselves. But he even acknowledges we're a nation within a nation, or an empire, we should say, and all of those things. So I'm glad we started with that question, and we know Robert Allen is the gold standard. So what I would recommend, speaking of that point and where it comes from historically, I've said this piece a million times. I'm going to keep saying it a million times. One of my favorites, Claudia Jones, On the Right to Self-Determination for the Negro People in the Black Belt, Political Affairs, January 1946. It's just too good. I don't know what else to say. You read that thing and it's solid all the way through. You could tell she was somebody who was in deep relationship in terms of theory and practice with Lenin, in terms of how she writes. Like, it's just very to the point, accessible, clear, all those. And I'd also recommend, in terms of video, a documentary called Raising Liberty Square. It's pretty recent. It's about climate gentrification happening in Miami right now. So it's more internal neocolonialism. But if you look at the history of Liberty City, one of the oldest housing projects in America, it's where my father's from, a lot of my family as well. It's a Black Miami neighborhood where a housing project was formed because Roosevelt came down to Overtown, or what was formerly called Colored Town, and saw the internal colony there. So you can read the descriptions. People live like people in the global South live, with mosquitoes and silverfish and cots and, dilapidated housing. And it was directly next to downtown as an exploitable labor force. So as downtown is being developed, it's a sundown town. Only white people are allowed to stay there in order to be the maids, to run it during the day, to build the downtown that we know now. They actually had to take people from colored town. And there's a story about the hurricane in the 1920s that actually destroyed downtown Miami. And what the white population did was went into colored town and grabbed up men, women, children, and dragged them, just like slavery, back into downtown to rebuild it. And so I think that's an important thing for the internal colony. Liberty City had a wall around it. You can actually still see remnants of that wall, though it's been torn down. And so there was an actual wall separating the internal colony from the metropole. And so that history has now been transformed. Raising Liberty Square talks about now, because these crackers have destroyed the planet, climate change, and Miami is ground zero for sea level rise, all of that development that we created in downtown is going to have to deal with flooding and sea level rise. And so the colonizers are now trying to move from the beach area, the coast, where they settled, inward, because where they forced Black people to live is actually on higher elevation than downtown. And so we're dealing with a whole new wave of gentrification where the colonizers need to come more inland because they're about to lose access to all the land that they've overdeveloped and destroyed. So I would 100% recommend that, just going through the history of Liberty City from then until now, and climate gentrification. So that being said, got some recommendations. In the show description, you will see the run sheets for this, all those resources. And we will move into, of course, ancestor Robert Allen, discussing a little bit about him. So Dr. Robert Allen, 1942 to 2024, was a guerrilla intellectual and professor of African American Studies at UC Berkeley, held a PhD in sociology. He served as the senior editor of the Black Scholar, the intellectual journal published by the Black World Foundation since 1969, shaping Black intellectual and political discourse for decades. He was born to activist parents. His mother, Sadie Allen, was a teacher at Spelman, and his father was a mechanic. He talks a little bit about this in an interview we're going to visit soon. This family legacy of community organizing deeply informed his lifelong commitment to struggle. And so what you see on the right here is a collection of his books. I think he has one on the sleeping car porters that I'm missing here, but these were a lot of the ones I could find. Black Awakening in Capitalist America, of course, being the most popular, the one we revisit. But there's a lot of others: Reluctant Reformers, Strong in Struggle, the Port Chicago Mutiny, Brother Man. And so there's a lot more to engage here. But this is Robert Allen, somebody who we consider one of the shining lights when it comes to developing internal colonialism and now internal neocolonialism. And if you haven't seen this, there's a legendary lecture held on I Mix What I Like, where Robert Allen talks about Black Awakening in Capitalist America. And so I wanted us to revisit a little bit of that. I'll have to play 5 minutes or so, and then we will discuss it. But I wanted people to know the context behind the book, the historical materialism to how this book gets created in the first place. So there's a bit of background where he talks about what brought him into the movement, his upbringing, and then the context behind this book.
I want to first now that
I'm going to get us on the right timestamp. Give me 1 second. Around 9 minutes or so.
say, well, how is it you happen to know about the book or the class? And the student will say something like, well, you know, my dad, when he was a college student, he read your book. And I'm thinking, your dad? Sometimes it's my mom. But these were students of people these were children of people who had read the book when it was first published. And that was very sobering for me to realize that amount of time, a generation had passed, but the book was still being used. And I'm anticipating any moment now to encounter a grandchild. It's possible, I figured it out, it's possible to encounter a grandchild whose grandparents read the book when they were in college. At that point, I think it'll probably be time to retire. But in any case, this is the book itself I have to say that it's not something I set out to write in the sense that I had a plan, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to write this book and so forth. It's a product of experiences. It's a product of my life experiences. It's a product of experiences in the movements. And I would say it actually comes as much out of those experiences as it does out of any studies or research, although I did a lot of study and research because my job at the Guardian newspaper was to cover the Black Power movement, the student movement, the anti-war movement, all of which I happened to be involved with as well. But that was regarded as an asset. If you were involved in the movements as well, then you really were there. So that was a good thing. But I was covering that for the Guardian, and then the book itself grew out of those experiences. The research, the years I worked at the Guardian, that was the research that led to this book. The book itself was actually written in a relatively short period of time after I moved out to the Bay Area. Having actually done the research, although I didn't know I was doing the research for a book at the time, I was able to put that together fairly quickly. And we've been thinking and talking a lot at the Guardian and within the Black Power movement generally about the notion of internal colonialism. And I was beginning to think that there was something else going on here. There was there was more to it than just the notion of the Black colony, that there was something else happening. And that really crystallized for me when I began writing a series of articles for the Guardian on the Black Power movement. And I wrote about the movement, but I also wrote about the Ford Foundation. And this was the first time I really began to understand neocolonialism. Because I actually went up to the Ford Foundation, I talked to them, they let me come in and look at the archives and so on, and then I realized that what the Ford Foundation was doing, not only locally or domestically, but globally, was introducing ideas and practices and paving the way for the development of neocolonialism, the further penetration of neocolonialism into the third world, and the beginning of the creation of a neo-colonial response to the Black movement in the United States. And that's where the idea came from in terms of my experience in my reporting. Of course, it was also important that I had been involved with the Black movement. I had also at that time been attending meetings by Malcolm X. I had first heard Malcolm speak, must have been about 1963, when he came to Morehouse College, where I was a student at the time, and he gave a talk. And I was just incredibly impressed by his articulateness, his insight, his knowledge of history, and his ability to convey all of that with a fantastic sense of humor, too. He had just a sharp, penetrating, biting sense of humor, because his humor was often about exposing us, ourselves, the weaknesses that we all have, and exposing those in a way that we could laugh at them as we also recognized what it meant. So when I graduated from Morehouse and moved up to New York City to go to Columbia, I started going to Malcolm's meetings there. He had, by that time, left the Nation of Islam, and he was organizing in Harlem the Organization of African American Unity, as well as the Muslim Mosque. And I began going to his meetings, and as fate would have it, I was at the meeting where he was assassinated, which was a horrifying experience, and one which was just devastated me totally. Not to mention, of course, the cost to him and his family, his death, and the cost of the family and cost of the movement of his assassination. And it took a long time to recover from that, because it was like losing the person that you most admired in the struggle, and here they are shot down in front of your eyes, literally. If you've seen the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee, the scene of the assassination in that is accurate. The way he portrays it, the way it was done, and the way there was a diversion created to draw people's attention, and all. It was professionally done. This was not something that was just a couple of guys, 3-4 guys thinking, okay, let's go kill Malcolm. This was professionally done. But that was for me, a real turning point, because on the one hand, I was devastated by it and felt like despair. Wow, how can we continue? How can we continue with this, with the loss of such a powerful leader? But at the same time, I had been inspired by his leadership and by his thought. And I realized that the best thing I could do would be to continue my work and to continue trying to develop some sort of social movement, some kind of movement for equality and justice and empowerment in this society. And that would be the best way that I could honor his memory.
So just wanted to outline that. There's a reason the book is so powerful. Like, honestly, it stands the test of time. It's actually repressed. You don't get to see it often. I know most people will go through their undergraduate, graduate career and never read it, but it's amazing. And hearing what it came out of is just really powerful for me. I know we have limited time. I highly recommend folks check out the rest of the interview. He discusses his mother's role. He discusses his father's role. He had a materialist lens. He said he was studying math and physics at Morehouse, and he got that from his father, who was a mechanic, but was like a mechanic in projects in the US. So he would go around as a maintenance man in the projects. And so just learning that kind of background, that working class Black history that formed this book is really helpful for what we're going to discuss today, which is this article, Reassessing the Internal Neocolonialism Theory. As the quote from Al, there's no post-colonialism, right? As you'll see in certain universities, post-colonial studies, as if Puerto Rico and Hawaii don't exist, right? But there's neo-colonialism. And so maybe we could get started with, in addition to the context of the article, this discussion in the chat. So there is a relationship between neocolonialism and internal colonization. Absolutely. A direct line from point A to point B historically. So just wanted to ground our discussion in that. Anyone want to kick us off with this article and Robert Allen?
I just wanted to say that I don't know why, I don't know how, and maybe there's some unconscious reason for it, but I'm very glad you played that part. I keep forgetting that he was there at Malcolm's assassination. And I'm just first of all, just all I really wanted to say was that I was very glad and honored to have been able to meet him. I was very glad and honored to have gone out of my way to accept an invitation to be at that event. And I'm very happy that I was a little bit pushy to make sure I got the audio recording of it, because I knew what was happening in real time. And, I'm glad I was a little bit pushy. And he was very humble, very gracious, obviously very committed and brilliant. And so, yeah, that was it. I'll let others go.
I have a somewhat funny story. When we did at Illinois the first conference honoring the Black Power movement, its 50th anniversary, Robert Allen was one of the people we brought in. And I had done something very stupid, and after eating some spicy food, touched my eyeball. So my eye was aflame. I had a patch on, and I didn't have any depth perception. So when I picked Robert up from the airport and I was trying to put the key, that's when you had keys to open your car door. I couldn't get it in the in the door, and yet he rode with me. That's all I can say. The man was brave. Um, Probably the biggest intellectual honor of my life is that Robert Christman selected me with Robert Allen's approval to succeed Robert as the senior editor for the Black Scholar. Um, this work, and I want to reply to something that was in the chat. The book Black Awakening is not about internal colonialism. It's about internal neo-colonialism. That often gets missed. And it's important that Allen, in the article, the talk, he roots his analysis beginning with Nkrumah's neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, which is, of course, a reference to Lenin's imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And so this notion of a post-colonial, no, it's neo-colonial. And Nkrumah was correct. Allen was correct to follow Nkrumah in that regard.
Absolutely. Again, with Raising Liberty Square, what I just want to point out is that this is the evolution. And so Robert Allen was saying we're at a critical juncture where we're going from direct internal colonialism, where that wall I'm talking about in Liberty City that literally separates Black and white people is now being torn down. But the residents are still dealing with what Du Bois talked about, Wall Street imperialism, but global finance capital. What does it look like now when some massive hedge fund that's buying up all sorts of the housing stock in the US is coming in and turning your whole block into an Airbnb unit, right? That is completely a different form of colonialism than what you're dealing with in the classical sense. And so I know too, like you've been asking this question a lot, like what does it look like to look down the nose of multiple generations of neocolonialism just being born in internal neocolonialism, and that is very destabilizing. It's very destabilizing to have your neighborhood. You have global finance capital turning your neighbor's house into an Airbnb. You have global finance capital that is bringing folks from Latin America and the Caribbean into your community, and you are providing the services. Your people have been there, and so we're providing services for a bunch of people who have now been displaced and brought in and are dealing with ICE while we're still dealing with police. Like, it is a completely chaotic reality. It still follows the baseline rules, though, I would say, of colonialism. It's just indirect rule, which I think Robert Allen gets at. One of the places I wanted us to visit real quick for internal colonialism, I always think it's interesting when certain people will deny it, Jared, right? Like scholars or whatever, and then the enemy, the feds, will say flat out, that's exactly what it is. That's what we're doing. It's 100% right what you're talking about. So Robert Allen talks about, again, to this period of neocolonialism, COINTELPRO, and how he was one of the early targets of COINTELPRO, and he was on a list, and the feds read his book, and they talked about natural liberation instead of national liberation or whatever. So he points out that the feds are sloppy and kind of lazy in their analysis, but they also understand that it's serious and that the point of view, the arguments these people are making are valid. So he talks about that. Again, recommend the interview, how he was on a watch list to be rounded up. Again, people, especially some white leftists I talk to, say we're sliding into fascism or about to be fascism. But Robert Allen was really on a list of people to be thrown in a secret prison if the government decided to flip the switch. So that is all very interesting, and that's why I wanted us to look at this.
Another great honor.
It's really, he seems, he's happy with it. And so this recently by Miami's own, Cuba's waste of Marco Rubio in the State Department, the capital of 21st century communism, Cuba. So I really think this piece is interesting. To the sloppiness point, there's clearly AI that was used in this, y'all. I don't know if you've read it yet. It's so clear that someone was using AI. All the typical, it's not this.
We just did me and CBS just recorded an episode yesterday on this, so it'll be out soon. Yeah.
Can't wait, because it is clearly, so it's clearly some sloppiness, clearly some, just like the anti-DEI board they put together, the fascists are not like trying to be rigorous intellectuals. So there's definitely AI, it's definitely lazy, it's definitely, I wish it were as coordinated of a network as they pretend it is in this piece. But when they talk about the racial revolution, I thought it was very interesting that they mentioned internal colonies. So, indeed, Stokely Carmichael's 1967 speech at the Organization of Latin American Solidarity, titled Black Power in the Third World, described Blacks as internal colonies within the United States. And so, the reason why I think this theory is super important is because our basis of entire struggle of Black nationalism, of socialism, is illegible without this framework, in my mind. Like, nothing makes sense, because otherwise we're just second-class citizens who are just being oppressed, and we need to struggle within, raceless worker struggle, and we'll make this a socialist country, whatever, right? But this is the meat of it all, where he says, in both practical, economic, and political terms, Carmichael told the audience in Havana, Black communities in America are the victims of white imperialism and colonial exploitation. Thus, Black power means we see ourselves as part of the third world, that we see our struggle as closely related to liberation struggles around the world. There's only one place for Black Americans in these struggles, and that is on the side of the third world. And so that is the core, to me, the essence of internal colonialism theory and why it's so important. Black people, Native people, even Chicano people to some degree, are colonized people, similar to how the rest of the world is colonized, and there's a separation between the two. So
I would say that, what Allen really does good in the reassessing internal colonialism piece is that he hones in on the two relationships that move you to neo internal colonialism. And that is, he talks about economics and the changing nature of the economic relationship. On the one hand, greater marginalization of the black majority, the working class, but on the other hand, using professional managerial class, they there is the creation, and it literally is the creation, the manufacturing of a black capitalist class, small level capital, right? So he centers on that, and then he centers on the fact that to go from colonialism, which is direct rule, direct white supremacist rule, which is what Trump and them want to get back to, that Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement forced the creation of neo-internal colonial, which meant that Black folks got the right to vote. And you see that if you're looking at quality of life indicators, right, almost all are stagnant from 68 to this moment. There's a few that are regressive, right? And then the only thing that you can say clearly, unequivocally, is positive, but I almost say positive, but directly increases, and the gap between black and white folks decrease is in electoral politics. In 1964, there's only 5 black people in Congress. Today, there's 66 black people in Congress, representing about 14% of Congress, which is reflective of our percentage of the population. So that shift to neo internal colonialism is important. And I thought Alan lays it out so concisely in that article.
I also just want to add and something I wish I would have seen or been reminded of or caught, because I read this earlier, but is that he perfectly assesses the concept. He doesn't say it this way, but he's ultimately perfectly assessing the whole argument around buying power as being an extension of neocolonialism. So really, even though he doesn't say it explicitly as George Jackson, he's really one of the few luminaries to actually catch that correctly. But because his work is suppressed and this analysis is suppressed, a lot of people don't. But he to Dr. Sundiata's point, he's saying this whole thing about markets and business and capital and consumption is all taking place within a colonial setting and set of relationships. So it becomes unnecessary to then to say explicitly that this is not a pathway to liberation.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a few things. One, when I think we talk about neocolonialism, I think what gets lost, and I think that's why I appreciate that he refers back to Nkrumah, because it's like it's not just about having a buffer class, because even under direct colonialism, you had a buffer class.
Buffer class.
Yeah, so that doesn't. If we only focus on the buffer class aspect of, we're not getting the full picture. One of the main things about neocolonialism, this is why I argue in my own work that neocolonialism is a prerequisite for neoliberalism. Like the white scholars often miss this point, that you need to have neocolonial leaders in place so you can then raid the commons in the first place. So if you want to come in and steal resources and you want to take public infrastructure, you need neocolonial leaders in place to follow those rules. Otherwise, you can't do that. So you need a neocolonial framework to even implement neoliberalism as an economic system. And that's true both here internally as well as, across the third world. But the point is, like, access to markets. So under direct colonialism, it's like if I'm France and I'm colonizing this area, Vietnam or something, this is mine. Or if I'm the British and I'm colonizing Nigeria, this belongs to me. And that led to a lot of these inter-imperialist wars, because there's this fight and race for resources, and that's how you're getting like these world wars and stuff. Once we open up the market and this country doesn't really belong to one, segment of capital. It's just open. It's an open border for for any capital to come in and snatch up the resources, and it's just kind of a competition from there. That's that, because remember, Nkrumah also says this is the highest stage of imperialism, right? So it's like this is their ability to be able to go into different markets and extract value that they couldn't get access to prior. So when we come back here to the United States, Glenn Ford, when I interviewed him, was very helpful in getting me to understand it. He talks about how Jim Crow was an impediment to capital too, because you had these rules that said Black people couldn't even shop here, couldn't work here, etc. And if you want to invest in a mall, this is something he said, if you want to invest in a mall in the South, you don't want to deal with all that. So you need that out of your way so you can, invest in the properties and invest in the different infrastructures you want to invest in. You don't have to deal with these segregation laws that actually impede your ability to profit in the most maximalist way, right? So getting rid of Jim Crow, similar to how when they got rid of slavery for colonialism, like with the Berlin Conference and all of that, getting rid of Jim Crow was a means of like opening up borders and opening up markets. And I think that part gets missed often. We look at just we get to be part of this and we are integrated or whatever. No, that's not necessarily a problem for them, because that's a concession they're willing to make so they can get, access to those markets. So Alan speaks to this, particularly in this piece. He also talks about in his original book how Black business, to Dr. Ball's point, actually ends up falling apart because those few markets that they did have capture over, now these corporations are able to enter into the community and capture those markets because now they have marketing budgets. Manning Marable talks about this and how capitalism underdeveloped Black America. Now they have ability to get into these markets, and your small business can't compete with Pepsi. Now you want Pepsi to give you money to stay alive, or your small business can't compete with Walmart or these different like multinational corporations that are entering into the Black community, and they need they need that buffer class to help them enter into that market, right? So like,
do you remember
The-
Killer Mike's Netflix series where he was going to have the Crips and Bloods do soda companies?
Yeah.
I just thought of that with the Coke and Pepsi. He's like, this is how we could have.
There's the other side of this, though, in the sense that they changed the nature of Black capital, right? And part of that change in his character, in the period from the end of enslavement into the 1970s, small Black businesses were what we could in some way describe as independent capital, in the sense that their only market was Black folk. So you will see things like during the Montgomery bus boycott, the Black owned taxi companies, they supported the boycott by lowering prices, right? In
And
order
the
to get people.
and they use a Black owned property like parking lot downtown. That's where they pick people up at. Yeah.
Yeah. And Snick talks about it all the time that Black landowners, that's where you could be safe. Well, when they changed the nature of Black capital, and what we get is franchise capital, and this is where the music companies come in, right? Because to compete and destroy Motown, you gotta take a major company like Atlanta and you create Philly International Records. You create and you give all these people franchises, and they do it in every sector. So it's franchise capital, which is owned by the major monopoly capitalists.
And they just
Therefore,
lease
those
it
Black
to you.
capitalists are now
Yeah.
dependent
Yep.
on the major capital, and they no longer service in any degree, where the old Black capital served us a bit.
Yeah,
And
because
that
you're just like you said, the franchise is an important point because they're like one of the biggest explosions of Black capitalism is ownership over McDonald's. Because
Yes,
McDonald's franchises. There's a whole
absolutely.
book about this. I can't remember the name of it that came
Oh
out
yeah,
not
yeah,
too
yeah.
long
There
ago.
is Golden Arches.
Yeah.
Tom
Yeah.
Burrell talks about it in his book too, and he talks about where it's acknowledged that it was Nixon who reached out to Ray Kroc, who then reached out to Tom Burrell and said, "Mark, use your black marketing agency to market black franchisees." So we can, and with Nixon saying to Ray Kroc explicitly, we need this to expand black capitalism as a redefinition of black power. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
All of that's fascinating.
Yeah.
To the interview point, Jared, and to your book, why I consider laundering, our histories like our hair, myth of black buying power, I mix what I like. All these are to me internal neocolonialism texts. And so Robert Allen in that interview we were just playing talks about that as well. One of the things, and I'll add to my list since y'all did three, I'll add Glenn Ford, The Black Agenda, as an excellent book for understanding internal colonialism and neocolonialism specifically. He looks at Katrina, he looks at the CDC, all of these things, and he just shows how they serve as a system of indirect rule. But what I find so powerful about a Ford or an Allen is that their experience, their lived experience, is within the Black community. So much, even in this report, is it implied that we have some other outside influence, even the fake Marxist critiques, right? That someone else is coming and riling us up. That's been since forever. Black scare, red scare. We got to have CBS on to talk about that, right? But people like Ford, like I was spinning at James Brown's radio station and I put hip hop on the radio for the first time. And I was at all the meetings and I was in the things and I talked in the project. Like they can tell from their own experience, internal colonialism and neocolonialism. Robert Allen, similarly, is talking about how he used to pass out Jet Magazine. That was one of his early jobs. And then he says, yes, I understood. And that was why the end of Jim Crow integration kind of ruined the dreams of Black capitalists. It made it impossible for them to maintain their stranglehold on certain markets. So Allen, just through his own lived experience, is arriving at this analysis. And what I would add to this conversation when we're talking about the Black misleadership class, as Bruce Dixon Glenn Ford coined, it includes the buffer class that we're so focused on, the political folks. But what we've talked about in this era, and the Creflo Dollar, the TD Jakes, is the celebrity class, right? Yeah. So it's not just the Black preacher, the Black businessman, and the Black lawyer and doctor who are the ruling buffer class, right? Now it is including entertainers. And so I would look at the market of the brain drain, especially under neocolonialism, that all these other people are dealing with. All these other countries are losing their best and brightest to come over to these American institutions, but so are we. And so when you break down Jim Crow, we look at this with football in Miami or in Florida in general. Florida is football country. It is an entire political economy centered around extracting talented Black youth from their neighborhood schools where they would have been able to develop football programs, where they would have been able to grow and draw capital in, and bringing them to elite private schools, and then taking them and then shaping that into a thing. So I see it so much with sports as well. And when Dre says the internal colony ruled over by compradors and corporations, absolutely. Another way I would maybe frame it for folks, fuck you, work till you die, slave. It's a direct colony versus 8 times the different, get back to work or you'll lose the ability to pay to live. I think those are some ways of framing it. And then to Mansour's point, and we can maybe address this as we start moving toward a close. So if we agree on internal neocolonialism as the issue, why do people still deny or shy away from the need for a national liberation struggle for new Africans? Well, I think the first part of your sentence answers that. We do not agree on internal neocolonialism as the issue. And that is the reason why people can move away from national liberation struggle. Even as I said, Jesse Jackson says we're an internal colony, and then we'll say, and that's why we got to integrate.
It's nation time.
How?
It's nation time.
So it's impossible. So we have a bunch of people who do not believe in national liberation struggle, and that would be our Black liberals, our Black misleadership class, but that would also be revisionist elements on the white left. So the reason why I talk about Claudia Jones so much is because she's citing Lenin to critique Earl Browder, who was being a revisionist in the Communist Party and moving away from the national question and saying, actually, no, Negroes do not want national self-determination because look at the civil rights movement, they must want integration. And so if you don't understand that, or not the civil rights movement in 46, but look at Negroes are moving for like basic political reforms and demand and stuff. And so if you see that, to me, that is how you understand why there's so much revisionism, why you have the American communist party, right, that is trying to say, well, Fred Hampton said that we're all just need the Rainbow Coalition, and it's not no national liberation struggle. We all just workers, and so that kind of thing. So I don't think we agree on
In,
that.
in fact, they're committed to putting out discredited theoretical concepts like caste. First of all, it's a horrible book, theoretically, conceptually, but it also isn't written that well.
It's
But that
not.
book wins the National Book Award because it is mysticism. For the same reasons that Oliver Cox said the caste theory was mysticism. But that's what gets promoted to the public. The other piece,
And then made into a film.
the, and the film was even
Promoted
worse than the book, right? Because the
promoted by the
film was
Ford Foundation.
narcissism. Yeah,
Full circle.
Yeah, promoted by the Ford Foundation. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I think if we get back to this notion of if you do not have a theoretical explanation for the condition and situation in which we, the African American people, a particular African nationality, find ourselves, I couldn't resist Jared, in which we find ourselves, then how do we plot a path to liberation or freedom or self-determination, whatever we want to call it, if we don't have a theoretical conception of what it is that oppresses us, and we're left, without, basically we're unarmed if we don't have a solid theoretical explanation for our condition. And there's nothing that is as empirically accurate in terms of describing our condition as neo-internal colonialism.
Yeah, yep. I had a screenshot from the actual article. Again, folks, show description in the run sheet. We'll have these, and I'm trying to add all the lists that we built together. So in the comments as well, if y'all are watching this on replay or now, please leave your own recommendations for internal colonialism or internal neo-colonialism for viewing, reading, anything like that, and I'll try and include it. But from this article, I think we've been talking about this point. There are a bunch of reviews of different topics from Black capitalism, but in economics, Black middle-class professionals are being integrated into corporate America, but a growing impoverished urban population, sometimes called the Black underclass, has largely been structured out of the economy, faced with growing hardships, chronic unemployment, homelessness, violence, police brutality, drugs. And so right there, we have the core of our economic situation. So Black Power is talking about in conversation with Nkrumah, which is that we're getting more and more Black representation in the highest seats of power. We're getting a Black Helen of Troy, who's the De Beers sponsor. We're getting Beyonce wearing blood diamonds, right? And at the same time, the conditions of the Black working class are getting far, far worse. And so just a great way to ground this. Again, Robert Allen, highly recommend his work. Appreciate this article. And we can maybe move into some takeaways. Go ahead.
Can I pose a question to the panel? So we talked about the Black church. I feel like we didn't get into everything with that, but how will we theorize the Black church under internal neocolonialism? Because what we read for this discussion wouldn't have been under that phase. So I'm just curious how we would theorize the Black church under internal neocolonialism.
Well, first, it's definitely got to be dialectical. And, as several people have said, the rise of the prosperity gospel, I think, is reflective of the neo-colonial piece. But the other piece is that with the coming of what I call financialized global racial capital, which is this particular iteration of capitalism, right? We've had capitalism in the US has had different forms, different structures of accumulation. This particular structure of accumulation, what ties it to, or the way in which internal neocolonialism is manifested it at this moment is the destruction of black institutions. So one of the things we got to realize, the black church is not. I don't know if they got those numbers that we saw on the '66. They
Right.
certainly don't have. They don't have the family structure. You know, it used to be extended families in black churches. Black churches now have a very. They got the young and the old, and then
Hmm.
it's largely women, right? And they're very small. Black churches are. So the idea that you would mobilize out of the church as the civil rights movement did is very, very, very difficult to do today. You have some mega churches, right? Even some AME mega churches, but you don't have the consistency of the size of the black population in those churches today, because every institution in the black community is targeted for destruction. Sorry it took so long to lay that out.
So
No,
that's where I
that's helpful.
struggle. If I understood that, so my as I would understand it dialectically, not every form of black institution is targeted for destruction. And in this forms of the black church that serve a neo-colonial purpose are welcomed. I just have to say, I was trying to think of a quick answer. I think
But
oh,
are they growing?
I'd have to
No,
look
I
at it.
mean, I'm around a lot of this stuff. They're not growing. There's no numbers. Yeah.
The data overall nationally, and I haven't looked specifically at the black community for this, but it seems to suggest that overall organized religion is fading in
Mm-hmm.
terms of participation. So, but the one quick parallel I just wanted to quickly draw that Alan touches on indirectly, others have talked about more directly, and some of the work that I'm becoming newly introduced to from the marketing and advertising community, there has been this long relationship I think appreciated certainly by me between prosperity gospel and black capitalism as a solution, all of it being promoted
Mm-hmm.
literally by white corporations into churches, black, white, and other, to use the pulpit to promote. So all I was just really wanting to say, I thought quicker than I am now, is that if we appreciate and understand, and to Baba Sundiata's point, if we have a proper appreciation for internal colonialism or neo-colonialism as a framework, then we can apply and look at it more appropriately dialectically to raise important questions around how is, maybe even in our personal level, how am I engaging my church or my faith or my spirituality, and to what extent am I being walked away from the radical forms and traditions, and to the, as I've joked before, if you're going to be a Christian, let Nat Turner be your guiding inspiration, and go from there. There was one other thing I thought I would say, and I've just lost the point. So I'll just say that I really appreciate this discussion, and thank you all very much. This has been very, very, very good. Thank you. So
Thank
yeah.
you. I know, Jared, I know you
The
might have to
same.
hop. We have some questions in the chat. Um, to the point of the Black Church and Prosperity Gospel, though, I would say, too bad you raised this question for the chat. So let me pull what I was trying to find. This is my book that I recommend all the damn time, just like the Claudia Jones piece, Frederick Harris's Price of the Ticket.
Yeah.
This is such a good book, so underrated. Price of the Ticket, Barack Obama and Decline of Black Politics. I know you and Jared recently did an episode on Obama in those years. So one of the things I was going to say is he gives a thesis about the prosperity gospel. The first one is here in his chapter on respectability politics. So what is the church's role in internal neocolonialism? Also in the, sorry, backtrack. In intro read, it does talk about secularization in the church. So again, they're tracing it through historical periods. So to your point, I would say when we look at that secularization point, where it's talking about how the church has to start competing and providing social services and answering certain
Mhm.
questions, that is already a force that is going to transform the church into a particular direction. He talks about respectability politics in here and how for quite some time now, the century-old Black middle-class ideology has been crafted by Black elites as a public philosophy aimed directly at policing the Black poor. And so
Yeah.
that's how I see the conservative strains of the church right now to police the Black poor. In Remix today, they were just talking about Tuskegee and the bonnet discourse. And it's not just Tuskegee. I had this same exact discourse in New York public schools around can kids wear bonnets and do-rags to school? And I'm like, yo, the kids are being sexually assaulted by the school resource officer, and y'all are here arguing about fucking bonnets. So to me, I think that's one of the main purposes is policing the Black poor. But then it talks
Mhm.
about social versus prosperity gospel. So when we're seeing even our limited Black capitalist class basically be wiped out or completely co-opted by internal neocolonialism, you need something to keep the people embedded in the myth. And I think prosperity gospel very much serves to do that. So I've talked about Bishop Eddie Long in previous episodes about this and his whole philosophy, very much like we said, Black respectability politics, very homophobic, all of those things, but prosperity gospel. So when he's flying around in the private jet, he's telling you that your tithe, which paid for that, is necessary for him to live God's word and God's mission. So I see in this context the church as a way to police the Black poor, yes, and keep us invested in this myth of Black capitalism by showing us, like, I don't think in the 60s, as we're talking about, there were pastors taking private jets. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not happening. And so when you see that, when you see your pastor in the Bentley Bentayga, I think that completely transforms your consciousness around what is possible through this prosperity gospel thing like that. So
Yeah,
that's how I see the
and
Black church.
I think even with the prosperity gospel, I think we're all honestly, I don't want to say we're past it. I think that's merged with other things because that got clowned a lot.
Mhm.
The preacher with the bins in the front of the church. So if you go to a church today, I mean, I through organizing, I went to a church for a year trying to. It was a mixed experiment, but I went to a church for a year. It was not a rich church. It was actually primarily folks that had been through the trenches that were at this church, but like the pastor himself was formerly incarcerated and all of that. But what you're hearing is kind of a mixture of some of the prosperity with this kind of like self-help kind of like motivational speaking
Mhm.
doctrine. That's what
Yeah.
you're kind of hearing. So there's a little bit more empathy in those sermons than the old kind of prosperity gospel where you're poor and you ain't shit. Like
Mhm.
they understand that just kind of turn. People just don't really want to hear that. Like, especially
Yeah.
people who aren't in a great condition. So there's still some of that, but it's mixed in more with this like this main character syndrome of the Bible where the whole world revolves around you and your relationship with
Yes.
God
Yep.
and you have and you can bring all these things into your life. You can attract and it's sometimes I don't even know if they're doing religion at this point. They're just doing or like Christianity. They're just doing the
Self-help.
kind of like they're doing the Oprah shit, right? Like if you can manifest it into your life by living a certain kind of way. So they de-emphasize scripture and they more so just talk about it as a
Yep.
lifestyle and how you move and how you live. And that's what I mean, you see that a lot on social media because again, just like we talked about the Black church historically, like this stuff folds back into it. So the Black church is influenced by the broader world that it lives in, right? So a lot of these doctrines that are popping up about, are you an asset? Are you a liability? Or, how do I live a prosperous life and this like neoliberal kind of human capital and all that
Yeah.
ends up in these sermons, even when and again, this was a church primarily of poor and working class Black people that I was in for about a year, trying to organize for political prisoner work. But like that was primarily the kind of sermons I was hearing. They still did good work there. I mean, they gave out clothes to kids that needed it. They
Yep.
had community garden. It wasn't your typical or wasn't this stereotypical like pastor sitting above everybody. It was a very much come as you are kind of church, right? So people didn't have to be all dressed up. So even some of the respectability politics that we talk about isn't necessarily the same. It's still there, but it evolves and mutates if you go into these places. So there's a lot of that self-help doctrine, I think, has really captured the Black church even more than just the prosperity. It's kind of merging itself. I think that's a broader situation that we live in, where a lot of ideologies that used to be in different like corners are kind of like intersecting and merge and just hodgepodging. That's why people are so full of contradictions now when you hear them speak, because they're just kind of throwing a lot of shit that they watched on Instagram videos into one ideas that doesn't actually like hold up consistently.
I was gonna say,
Too Black. I think you got it right there. That we're in this moment of transition, and that Allen wrote about a different moment of transition. He wrote about the moment in which direct white supremacist rule, colonialism, internal colonialism, was transitioning to neo-internal colonialism. The Trump forces, they're fascists. They intend to take us back to direct white rule. And in that context, every institution is under a certain type of attack and is transforming to adjust itself to the basic economic environment, which is different than what it was under neoliberal financialized capital. It's worse. And they're adjusting to the emerging new ideology, which is a return to biologicalism. You know,
Yeah.
we're that black folks are inferior. The DNA is inferior. That is back.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think mutation is the perfect word, and yeah, for these conditions, because you have to still
Can't
keep
hear
the
you.
church doors. Oh, wait, hello.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, you can hear
I
me.
hear you.
Okay, yeah, I think mutation is the word for it. Sorry, folks, Sundiata, I don't know why you can't hear me.
Josh, we
Um,
can't hear you.
I can hear him.
I can
can't.
hear him too. I don't know. But this happened with me and Renee the other day, where for some reason she stopped being able to hear me when everybody else could. I don't know what's going on. I think there's maybe a StreamYard thing glitching with people's computers. I don't know.
can you hear Jared? Oh,
Can you
he
hear
can't
me,
hear
Sundiata? I don't think so.
you. No, I
Hey, but
don't think.
listen, while I'm here, I do have to go, everybody.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't want to just be that abrupt. So I apologize for that. But I thank you, Lorik, and everybody for putting this together and organizing it so well. And salute to Robert Allen and internal colonialism, and to the undefeated chat, of course. But
Appreciate you,
I'm gonna have to
Jared.
jump, man. Thanks,
Yeah, I know
everybody.
you stayed a little extra. Thank you. Peace, bro. We'll close it out. We got three things from the chat. Hopefully, Dr. Sundiata. Do you want to try two Black? You want to talk to him? Tell him to try and leave and come back to the studio.
Dr. Sundiata, if you can hear me, try to leave and come back. Maybe that'll give you maybe that'll fix the tech issue.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me, or
I
just two
can't
Black?
hear Josh.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you want to hear us both, maybe leave and come back.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll be able to hear everybody.
No, he's going to rejoin us. We got three things in the chat I wanted to maybe address, and then we could close it out. But yeah, too like everything you were saying, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like even the white church you went to, I like that type of new age spirituality where it's like the soft Christian
I
rock
didn't.
and
For the
whatever
record, I
that.
didn't go. I didn't go. I
What you
watched it
watch?
online. Yeah,
What you
don't.
watch online?
I went to a Black church. The one I was talking about. I ain't go. I ain't going to one of those. I couldn't do it.
Just watched it. Sorry for the distance. Can you hear me now, Baba India? Okay, cool. So we got three things in the chat to address. But yes, I was going to say it's the same way. I remember it used to be, and to be clear, like even comparing the white and the Black church, we're always going to have to do the thing, right? That's the core of it. So even in these prosperity gospel churches, if you're talking the early eras, like when we were growing up in the 2000s and shit, they still had to do programs for the community.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that some of these Black megachurch pastors could have gotten away with the Joel Osteen shit, where your actual community is not allowed in during a hurricane and stuff. That is 100%, I think, a white evangelical.
Nah.
I think you get torched trying to do that as a
Yeah.
black pastor. So even the church, while it was, doing that sort of thing with the prosperity gospel, they were still providing services. They still do the bread and butter things that the church is required to do. But I think, and I'm sure there's research coming out about this, articles and all that, but COVID will be a good example of that kind of adjustment that has to happen in this era, in this chaos, in all of these collapses. What were the churches dealing with? The older churches that don't have youth who can help with the tech for setting up Zoom services. What are the churches dealing with when they have to get tithe from people and they're not getting these same services or being even in the same space together? So all of that, I think, is going to create a need for flexibility in the philosophies of the church. So yeah, even back in my day, the big thing about our church, like people could wear jeans, and that was a discussion about you could wear jeans to service and sneakers. And my
Again, they're
pastor
trying
was
to
going,
hold on to membership, man. Like,
Yeah.
like some of these adjustments they've made, even if they're progressive, like accepting LGBTQIA folks, some of these are just purely economic decisions too. I don't want to reduce it to that. I'm not saying some people are not moved or converted over to a different position, but I'm saying some of this is just membership is on the decline. Again, there's more competition. There's other things for people to do. And again, part of why I used to go hard on the church, but I'm like, I find I'm not religious but spiritual people way more annoying than I find black Christians, to be honest with you. so because at least people who go to church that are in the community, like they have so people who are just like, I find those people way more annoying and useless than black churches, because at least churches they're physically somewhere. People come into a building, they form some relationships. Even if it's minimal, they give out a scholarship for somewhere to go to college. I'm not religious, but spiritual people don't produce any of that shit. So I have way more smoke at this point in my life for them than I do for black Christians.
Same. That was the biggest thing for me as an atheist. I'm like, y'all, if you can't do what the black church did, what are you doing? Like, all of that is just, individualist. My star signs and whatever you want to be. Like,
I got way more
astrology is that. And I'm not gonna get into the astrology. Like,
if you want to do an astrology bashing episode, I'll be way less balanced than that.
That's gonna be a special episode of this program. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been hesitating on these three, so let's get into it. Brittany first says, does neo-internal colonialism apply to all black folks who end up as American citizens, whether they immigrate here by choice or have origins here through slavery? I know your book gets into this, Baba Sundiata. The short answer is yes, no question, but maybe we want to elaborate more on why it applies to all black people, including immigrants.
It's complex, but and so I'm going to say that it eventually applies to all black folk, including immigrants. But if you look at structures of community, right, for the most part, African and Caribbean immigrants don't live in the same spaces with African Americans, meaning a majority, right? Because there's a very distinct class difference, particularly in terms of African immigrants. Those African immigrants who have tended to come to the U.S. have been middle class. Now, the East Africans tend to not be as middle class, but there also tends to be fewer of them, right? And so given that initial move is to not reside in black communities, not participate in African American institutional life, I would say that it takes time for the full weight of neo-internal colonialism to apply to those populations. Certainly the second generations tend to be more engrossed in African American communities, tend to be perceived as African Americans, right? Boom. But I think that there's a time lag that we have to adjust for. But they are suffering certain things that are just what the term would be racial discrimination. They experience those kinds of things, which is why I think the idea that you would make an argument that foreign-born black folk of whatever generation would be ineligible for reparations is crazy. Because if you're black in the U.S. empire, you are getting abused in some way. Now, there's I'll just leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Too Black, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I probably want to put more thought to it than thinking out loud, but I think some of that depends on, and even in Robert Allen's piece, right? Like he talks about the immigration law in 1965. We didn't get to the fact. I don't know if I fully agree with his kind of endpoint about the voting patterns and stuff at the end of that piece, but and how that might thrust, something. I don't know if that's working necessarily, but 1965, prior to that, there was like racial quotas in terms of who could get into the country. And there's a book, The Minority Rights Revolution, that really is a critical of that law. It talks about how part of that was, like you talked about, Laura, like a brain drain. And part of why that's part of why that was passed. And it was also a way to compete with, it was passed as a means of trying to keep up with the way the world was moving technologically. So you needed to let more talent into the country so you could keep up with it, right? So some folks came in that wave. There's an older wave of black immigrants that I think more so would fit into the internal colonialism, like post 1965. Post 1965 is still a long time, so I'm not saying those people don't fit in it. I'm just saying, like, when you go back to like the Garvey movement and that era of that's a different. I think they have more of a relationship, to quote unquote like Black America or whatever people want to call it. But I think it depends on, again, when we say internal colonialism or even neocolonialism, or even when we say a nation, we're not saying this is like some liberatory space where everything is good. It's like, if it's a nation, it still has all the contradictions that any nation has. So it still has, class exploitation even within it. Internally, it still has, a petty bourgeois. It still has patriarchy. Like, all those things are still existed within it. So the ones who attempt to, whether it's due to their geographic location, where they actually move to a place where Black people live, versus those folks that get relocated to some white city and they end up Mormons or something like that. Like, it depends on where people get relocated.
Absolutely.
But if you get relocated, like here in Indianapolis, there's a lot of Haitians, but they live like on the west side amongst a lot of Black folks, right? They're not somewhere else. So I would say in that case, yeah, in the cases of people who integrate into a fabric that's not really in relation to Black people who were formerly slaves, I think that's a little bit more complicated. I think that needs more study. That's why I don't want to speak too definitively on it, because I think those are solid questions.
Can I say this?
Go ahead.
Too Black, I appreciate you bringing in the question of nationality, because one of the things we know is that Haitians, Ethiopians, Somalis have tended to be working class and have tended, depending on place, right? It's like the pluralization process. If depending on their numbers, are either incorporated into the Black community, or if they're large enough to have a separate existence, right? That can happen. But those populations that are more working class are more likely to be integrated into the African American social community sooner than the petty bourgeois coming out of Nigeria.
Yeah.
And there's a different relationship.
Very different. Yeah.
I see two comments that get at what I was going to add to this conversation. One is from Zenzi, probably because they haven't had to live the physical presence of white folks in their home countries, so they experience a different kind of colonialism. This is exactly what, if you see, there's a beautiful interview with Kwame Ture interviews his mom about her experience moving from Trinidad, and they described it very much that they didn't use. They used colored instead of Negro and all of those things, but he was a taxi driver and he experiences American racism like that as soon as he gets here. So I think the working class history the Haitian community in Miami, especially because it's over 100 years of Haitians being here. So even every internal, I like that we call it colonies. Every internal neo-colony has different historical experiences to it.
Mhm.
And so the Haitian and Jamaican community in Miami is not the same as some of these other places. So that would be my first point. And then the reason why I said yes, just a blanket yes, just to Esme's point, even if we live in these white spaces, we experience US style racism. And that's why you'll see these people, even these petty bourgeois folks, try and distinguish themselves from African Americans because
That's
they
right.
are
That's right.
experiencing the same shit we are, and they're trying to be like, no, I'm not like them niggas over there.
Yeah, I'm not
But
one of
you,
them.
so I
Yeah.
would just say that is why even if you come here and you go to these white spaces, their ideas about Black people, about class society, comes from internal neocolonialism. So you're going to experience it just from a different position. So I think that's the flat answer.
Yeah, and
why
when
I
we were
say
talking
yeah.
about those white churches. Again, I'm not trying to get on no ADOS shit, but I'm saying in terms of who's more likely to be at those places, it's not us.
Yes. If you don't know, yeah,
So,
that's that historical
yeah.
memory to tell you. As soon as we walk in, our spider sense would be like, nah. Get up out of here.
But even Black immigrants represent about 10% of the U.S. Black population, but they represent 30% of those who vote for Republicans.
Mm.
Right, and that's a class question, but it's also, as you were pointing out, Josh, it's a question of indoctrination. When I first went to South Africa in '95, they were showing sitcoms, African American oriented sitcoms, right? And they were showing the pilots, and these were pilots that they didn't even show in the U.S. They were so awful in how they depicted us, but they're educating Black South Africans to see us in the way in which even white racists wouldn't depict us here.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. Next comment, number 2. Pascal Robert just said revolutionary Black nationalists are also contained by their suspicions of white left that leads to a containment politics for the notion of an internal colony and only serves so on and so. So I've heard this argument before. Flat out, I would
can you break, if you've heard this argument, can you explain what's being said here?
Please.
It's because it's an adult read argument. That's why I already know where it's going. Basically saying that we have a containment politics, that we are suspicious of Marxism because of our Black nationalism. And so our ideas of internal colony and all of that limit us from fully engaging with the revolutionary theory of the left and so on and so forth. So it's a fancy way of saying revolutionary nationalists reject Marxism. Is how I'm reading it. Ready, if I misread that, let me know. But I've listened to enough Pascal Robert to know it. And the only way I would change this, if you change contained to informed by, everything in the sentence works fine. So that's my comparison. Yes, Black nationalists, revolutionary Black nationalists are informed by suspicions of the white left, because we've had a history of engaging the white left and being betrayed by the white left, like the Claudia Jones article I'm telling you about. So it's not that our politics are contained, it's that we actually live in an internal colony and we cannot move without addressing that. So that would be that's I think what the comment is getting at, like we're just limited because we're nationalists. And sorry.
It assumes because of the critique that no one engages with them. Well, that's also just not true, right? Like I'm talking about with the white left, like
Right.
You can have all those critiques. Many of us have had them, whatever. And that's something that Robert Allen was getting at, even in that last piece, was about how the revolutionary nationalists, he literally says when he talks about how Black Power broke into 3 different strands, he said the revolutionary nationalists were the ones who were willing to work with, broader coalitions beyond just Black folks. So I don't think that I don't even think that really holds up historically, because the revolutionary nationalists have been the most probably open to those questions more so than the cultural nationalists or others who are more so like, we're going to just stick to our own. And sometimes I understand. so I'm saying, like,
Harrison, there's so many examples. Sorry, go ahead, Baba Sundiata. I was going to
so the whole idea of a revolutionary nationalist, by definition, is a Black nationalist who is willing to engage Marxist concepts.
Yeah.
right? Our
Yeah.
problem isn't with Marx and the theory that emerges from Marx. Our problem is with what we call white Marxism, which misreads Marx from our perspective.
Yep. And go ahead and read Brockhill's again. Go to Black Myths. Go see. It's not just a Western Marxism. Please look at why
Yeah,
our
yeah.
folks were rightfully suspicious of Western Marxists being bankrolled by the feds. Yes, it's going to make some of our nationalist-minded folks are going to have a reactionary kind of rejection because of just actual experience and community with these folks. But a lot of us have engaged, studied, and we just know our history. So I would say that folks like Pascal Weber do not know that. One of the
Can
things
I
I would
just say
talk
one
about.
other quick thing? Do these
Sure.
people realize that when the Algerians were fighting the decolonial war against the French, when the Vietnamese were fighting the decolonial war against the French, the government in France was socialist?
Yeah. Right. National social.
Understand
It's like
that.
national socialists. Yes, they're very right. So that's why even Zora Neale Hurston has some pretty bad piece on communism. Very anti-communist piece, and in it's just a bunch of mythology, right? Because that's what allows the feds to spread that kind of stuff in our community. She's just saying a bunch of Fed takes on communism based on myths she heard about the Soviet Union. So I think there's even that element. But she is not a revolutionary nationalist the same way Baba Muhammad Ahmad is, and he directly talks about socialism. So I wanted to bring this example up to just talk about being wary of the white left. I have this book. The Socialist Workers Party, SWP, still goes around and they sell it. They're very revisionist. Some of them are
Oh my
straight up
God.
Zionists.
They're
Yeah.
Zionists, man. No,
It's straight up
organization is
Zios,
Zionist.
right? But Malcolm, in his time, spoke at the Socialist Workers Party in Harlem. So this book actually does detail their organizational. So to your point, too, Blake, about us being willing to move across lines. Malcolm says when you meet a white person who's not racist, chances are they're socialist. And then Malcolm talks to back when the Socialist Workers Party wasn't a Zionist party, the Socialist Workers Party. And so they actually use this book with speeches from Malcolm X that he gave at the Socialist Forum, that he gave in Harlem and all of that. However, just read the back cover of this book. It is revisionist, though. That is the danger of this book. It immediately says, don't think of Black people as an oppressed national minority. I shit you not. It's right on the book. I wish I had the back of it. Maybe I could find it. But it flat out rejects internal colonialism on the book while talking about Malcolm. So that is why Malcolm would not trust y'all. If y'all are going to take my shit, try and use me as a mascot, and then remove the most radical elements of my theory that apply to my experience. So book has great receipts. It has some good interviews. It does talk about Malcolm X, again, having workers' consciousness, having a dialectical materialist understanding of the world. But at the end of the day, the white left ends up doing their thing. So again, we're informed by how the white left operates, the Western Marxists. So
yeah, I mean, I typically, I've never had any issue with Pascal, so I don't know. Yeah. So I don't know.
It's just his tendency, bro.
I don't know if that's just the comments or that's actually what was said, but yet
it's his
tendency. I don't think
he,
that critique holds up.
He tends to scoff at the Black radical tradition, in my opinion, and dismiss it in some ways. It doesn't engage it as deeply as we do here. That would be my fundamental critique. I have no problem saying this to him because he called it the Combahachie River Collective, bro. Like,
if he's talking about Cedric Robinson's Black radical tradition, it should be dismissed.
Sure, but then you can't lump everything in under that, right? Which is what we're talking about. No. And then again, Combahachie, whether you agree with identity politics or not, first off, it just means you didn't read it, which is my number one critique: no investigation, no right to speak. And second of all, Combahachie is related to Black history and Harriet Tubman. So, not knowing how to say that again is illustrating my point about not studying our history properly. Last one before we close, we had. Comrade Mansour from earlier. Okay, thanks for the response. But I'm talking about folks in Black left spaces and orgs that accept this premise of internal neocolonialism, but deny the name New African Independence Movement as a solution. For example, are you all in support of names? So that was a question for all of us. I can start. I know, Sundiata, you have ties to this, so it'll be even more interesting for your answer.
Yeah.
But I'll say, Yeah, I don't reject it at all. What I think is that you can agree on the foundation of the analysis and disagree on the pathways to solutions. So I know that the RNA, for example, talks about us having land in the Black Belt South and forming an independent nation there. And so if you can agree with internal neocolonialism and disagree with that
Right.
as a pathway for our liberation. So I agree. I actually am interested in names solutions as well. I don't deny those. I'm just more agnostic about which approach is going to work. I think it'll be proved through practice. But I say there's a Black nation and we can liberate that shit. I'm all for it. How you feel, Baba Sundiata, about that question? Do you support name? You
Yeah. I think that there are three paths that are open to us, and one would be the name solution of independent nation state. I was in the Republic of New Africa. I've been in Malcolm X grassroots. I share that, have since I was a teenager. I'm also open to the possibility of autonomous zone within a socialist US. I'm open to that. And I don't oppose the Pan-Africanists who want to return to the continent. I think that those are decisions that we should have. That's part of when I say self-determination, those are self-determined possibilities. I just lean more toward the nation state because of lived experience.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that. And this brings us to the end. I know this is a marathon, y'all. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate Two Black for waking up. Episode 6, Black Atheist Tradition in the Books. Very excited about how the series has been going. Again, in the comments, if you have any recommendations for folks who want to learn about internal colonialism, internal neocolonialism, please drop those in the comments. And then I'll allow my host to share what they got going on. Anything you got coming to the platform, any work you want to promote, campaigns. We can start with you, Baba Sundiata.
I would just say that I'm getting ready to make some changes to Real Talk History of Black Liberation. Beginning in September, once a month, Lou Turner is going to join me, and we're going to do great books, significant events, and great personages as a deep dive. We're going to we're starting a senior moment. We're starting with Booker T.
Oh, for slavery?
Because September 18th is when he gave the Atlanta betrayal speech. And so we're going to take on the speech. We're going to take on his book, his autobiography, Up From Slavery. And then we're going to take on this book that suggests a different read for Booker T, a class conscious Booker T, in The Man Furthest Down. So we're going to reevaluate Booker, and then we're going once a month, we will take on a great personage event or a great book.
I'm very excited for that.
Yeah,
And I'll Baba Loose.
that sounds interesting. Because I was talking. I don't know if that was on our recording or not, but Dr. CBS was talking about that this new interpretation. Or I don't want to say new, but it's been brought back. I think the interpretation has been out there for a while, but it's being brought back to the front, I guess. So I would be interested in how you handle that conversation.
Very interested. Shout out Hubert Harrison though. Two Black. What you got coming up?
Yeah, primarily is that episode. It might be 2. I have to sit down and edit with me and Dr. CBS. The myth was good socialist, bad communist. So we were pushing back, against this notion of we're pushing back against this idea when people say, well, we're just socialists, we're not communists, and as if communism is this bad thing and socialism in this, I guess, democratic socialist form is this good thing. And how with the Cuba document that you shared and all the other shit that's coming down the pipeline, that's not really good. That kind of framing doesn't help anybody because you just end up punching left and creating a justification for your own, targeting, because the state doesn't even care about that. So they're not like, oh, Mom Donnie's a good socialist and Lorik is a dirty commie, so we're going to only target Lorik. That's not even how this
That's
plays
right.
out. So, all y'all are in that document. DSA, we in that. BAP's in there. It's all we all in that. So
But they're gonna make sure Zoran snitch on Lorik though. That's how it's going. They go
yeah,
off
they
with Zoran
trying
a
to
deal.
yeah. They trying to set it up that way, and we're just like, that's but DSA's in the doc. Anti-communism is never really. They don't care about these distinctions as nearly as much as we do. It's not to say we shouldn't have ideological differences. It's just to say that they shouldn't get to a point where you put them above reality. so yeah.
Difference between antagonistic and non-antagonistic differences.
Yeah.
More dialectical materialism. I appreciate y'all for showing up. Shout out Jared as well. It's a great conversation. Black August coming up, so be sure to tune into any of the programming we have here. I believe Tanny's going to be doing The War Before, Sophia Bakari, Sunday book sessions, but we'll have a lot more programming coming to the platform. And you can see what's coming up next. We're going to be looking at gender and sexuality from a dialectical perspective. That'll be next month. So we're going to have some great conversations. The video that we're going to view before that is already in the show description. Appreciate y'all. As Jared says, as Chairman Fred Hampton used to say, as we like to say, peace, only if you're willing to fight for it. And we'll catch you next time.